Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching first part of what if Naruto was forced to join Holy Grail War by old man Zelretch. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting any more time, let's start the story.
Let me get this straight. You want me to participate in a war? Yup. A war that takes place in a fucking city of all things, filled with many, many civilians. Yes. A war that has had absolutely no victor for the past few hundred years. Huh. You want me to participate in the heavens field? Got that right. The first man looked deadpan at the second. Can I ask a question, you old vampire? Ask away, Naruto. Naruto, the first man, cleared his throat. Root dammit, why are you trying to get me to fight in a war again, old man? Naruto, the man with the blonde hair, was tall, roughly 6 feet, give or take a few inches. The back of his shoulder length spiky blonde hair was framed by 2 bangs that framed his face. He had striking cerulean blue eyes that danced vivaciously, but they had a jaded appearance, and he was well built, but not excessively so, more like a runner or martial artist. As though in his 20 years of life he had witnessed far, far too much. However, the 3 whisker marks that adorned both of his tanned cheeks were his most striking features. He was quite attractive, almost falling into the pretty boy category. To make matters worse, he was standing there with his hands in his pockets and wearing a black suit to be exact. Zelretch, or more precisely Kisher Zelretch Schweinord, was an elderly man who was graying. He had gray hair, a gray beard, and other graying features. In addition to wearing black clothes of a different style, he had striking crimson eyes. He possessed the kaleidoscope, the second true magic, and was a vampire, more precisely, a deceased apostle ancestor. Zelretch flinched. I forgot about that. Anger caused Naruto's eyebrow to start twitching. You know damn well that I don't enjoy endangering civilians. This entire idea is a bad one. Fighting in a conflict over something as stupid as the Holy Grail sounds like a very, very bad idea, especially if other magi are involved. But it'll be entertaining. You'd kick a puppy if you found it amusing. Zelretch's hands went up. Got me there. Naruto crossed his arms and tapped a foot on the ground, saying, give me a good reason to fight in the heavens field. Zelretch sighed, well, the prize for winning is a wish. A wish? Something as stupid as a wish? No, actually a wish. As in, your deepest desires will be granted. Naruto fell silent. A wish, huh? So, this debacle is over a mythical wish granting device. Yeah, and it can. Yes, it can actualize miracles and accomplish the impossible. Zelretch grinned. So, now you're actually considering it. Naruto grinned sadly and said, actually, no, I have no regrets, you know. In the end, I made my world better. I brought about a change, a chance for a better existence. After walking a path of blood. But don't you want to change that? Make it so that all of those losses never happened? The younger man gave a headshake. If I rewrote the past like that, I would be spitting on the corpses of all of my friends. I mourn and remember them, but I won't regret the decisions that I made, ever. I have already accomplished more than most people could in a lifetime. I don't have a wish that I would like to see made true. You know you've already been chosen, right? Naruto revealed a glowing, stylized sword like mark on his left hand by rolling up a sleeve. I'm aware. This thing appeared about a week ago. The Grail wouldn't choose you, unless there was something that you wanted, some inner desire. Naruto cast weary blue eyes onto his teacher. I am aware. We both know that I have had 3 desires. I wanted to bring about a gentler existence to my world. I have done this. I wanted to give my friends and precious people, my comrades in arms, happiness. I have done this, and still am doing this, every day that I live. And you want to see her again, don't you? With a somewhat feeble smile, Naruto said, it would be nice. Yes. But I won't, because I will not disturb the sleep of those who have passed. She is the one regret that I have. She should not have died. You do know, the Grail is capable of bringing back the dead, don't you? Naruto held up his hand. Zelretch, don't tempt me. Please, I beg you. The elderly sorcerer obeyed. Can I not convince you then? There were lengthy periods of silence during which the 2 men silently looked at one another, one with crimson eyes and the other with piercing cerulean ones. The younger blonde finally said something. We both know that I have already decided what my course of action is to be, he exhaled. You old man, manipulating my feelings like that. Taking out a bag, Zelretch said, in that case, a catalyst, take it. Thank you. Naruto disappeared in a burst of golden light. Zelretch let out a sigh. You damn brat. You always had an obsession with protecting people, especially when it involved Akane. He forced him to leave. Best of luck to you, then. I can only hope that you'll find that piece of your heart that is missing. The elderly man's figure was illuminated by a beam of moonlight. He was gone when it was over. As he continued to lay out the summoning circle in the center of his small apartment, the man with the blonde hair hummed softly to himself. A long time had passed since he had lived solely for himself. His relatively normal, for him, lifestyle appeared to be about to undergo a drastic change. However, he thought, I can no longer be considered strictly human, can't I? Due to the fact that I am not of this world. Of course, strictly speaking. Afterward, there's that minor element. Naruto Uzumaki acknowledged that his life was not perfect. To bring about world peace, he had his best friend murder him. After his friend passed away, he was completely incapable of caring for other creatures. No, his friend, his lover, spouse. And when Naruto Uzumaki discovered that he was a contestant in the 4th Fuyuki Grail War, he scoffed at the idea itself. A conflict that would grant one wish to the victor. Just one wish. What a self-centered notion. The instant Hinata passed away, he was already dead. When others were suffering, a dead man had no right to be alive. Furthermore, dead men had no right to make wishes when there were still living people. Nevertheless, out of self-interest, he became a master in this conflict, but to avoid the melancholy thoughts, Naruto shook his head. After clearing his throat, he got to his feet. It's almost time then. At midnight, that's when my powers will be at their peak. He was currently standing in the middle of a spacious room in a penthouse apartment suite, which had a circle drawn of blood imprinted on the middle of the floor. He was searching through a bag for something, and he was dressed entirely in black. He located it and extracted it. It was a sheath, a sword sheath. A European broadsword, more precisely. More precisely, the holy sword that the lady in the lake presented to King Arthur. It was quite a sheath. Like a crown or staff, it was a piece of opulent gold. Encrusted, blue. Enameled equipment that looked more like a treasure to demonstrate nobility and dignity than a weapon. Fairy letters were engraved in the middle to indicate that it was something other than a human creation. More. This was Avalon, the conceptual weapon. That far-off utopia. He thought it was among the most exquisite things he had ever seen. It was quite appropriate for something that represented one of his deeper desires. On a temporary altar, Naruto put the sheath. That is a beautiful sheath. Old man Zelretch really must have done some digging around for it. In actuality, Zelretch had stolen Avalon from the Einsburns after they had dug it up from Cornwall. Why did he give it to Naruto in order to initiate the ritual? He believed it would be. To put it mildly, it was entertaining. Even though actually stealing the sheath was a pain in the ass. However, Zelretch may be the largest troll in the Nasuverse. Might as well get the ritual started. The time was 11:59 p.m. The 4th Fuyuki Grail War is 1 month away. An apartment in Japan's Tokyo. The home of Wizard Marshal Kishua Zelretch Schweinord's apprentice, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed magus in training. The man is hollow. When he saw the clock approaching 12, he shook his head at these distracting thoughts. The incantation was started by the magus with the blonde hair. The circle, that blood-drawn circle, started to glow. A summoning did not require theatrics. All that was needed was a circle with a magus and an artifact to increase the likelihood of selecting a chosen servant. The summoning was actually done by the Grail. Silver and iron to the origin. Gem and the Archduke of Contracts to the cornerstone. The ancestor is my great master Schweinord. The blonde magus could feel the prana rushing through his circuits like blood through veins as the glowing intensified. The alighted wind becomes a wall. The gates in the 4 directions close, coming from the crown, the 3-forked road that leads to the kingdom circulate. A buzz of power erupted, irritating sensitive ears as more prana flowed. Avalon started to glow, as though it could sense the coming back of. Shut, fill, shut, fill, shut, fill, shut, fill, shut, fill. Was it worthwhile? Was it worth starting a new battle and performing this ritual? Repeat every 5 times. Simply, shatter once filled. Most likely it wasn't. Even Naruto didn't understand why he would want a wish. He had already experienced one life, and he never felt regret for the difficult route he had followed. Or perhaps he regretted it. He regretted 2 things. That he had to shed so much blood to effect change, and that a person died who shouldn't have. I make an announcement. You are beneath me, and your sword holds the key to my demise. If you adhere to this sentiment, this rationale, then respond in line with the Holy Grail's resort. Therefore, if the blonde had a single wish that she could express in clear terms. Here is my oath. I am the one who becomes all the good of the world of the dead. I am the one who lays out all the evil of the world of the dead. Naruto was extremely weary of fighting. If only to save the innocent lives that were in danger, he would take part in this final battle. The person who came up with this entire system ought to be kicked in the balls for allowing it to occur in a populated city. Kisher Zelretch Schweinorg and Madu Zoken both shivered and sneezed. The alternative explanation? There was a darker, more profound desire that went against all of his principles. So what is the real desire of my heart? What do I want? You come from the ring of deterrence, O keeper of the balance, 7 heavens wrapped in 3 words of power. And with an intense, dazzling light, in a burst of energy and a flash of white, the world vanished. And after everything had calmed down, a slim figure's silhouette was visible through the smoke rising from the summoning circle, and then the figure spoke. My name is Saber, servant. I beg you, are you my master? 3 weeks prior to the beginning of the 4th heavens feel, on what could be described as a night of fate. All stories start at a single point, at a beginning. And so the story begins, a grand tale, a sad tale, one that would have ended in tragedy but will instead take a different path. The story is about masters, knights, and heroes. It remains to be seen if this is for the better or worse. What do you want to eat, Saber? A blonde girl wearing a blue skirt and white shirt was sitting at the table with utensils in hand, while a dashing blonde with spiky hair was currently searching through his tiny apartment's refrigerator. The girl's stoic response was, "It does not matter to me, master." You're incredibly casual about what you like to eat, aren't you, Saber? Do you really have no preference? The blonde man asked, waving a tanned arm in the air. With a tiny bit of drool dripping from her mouth at the thought of her master's cooking, the other blonde said, whatever master cooks is delicious, though. I cannot decide between all of those delicacies. I'm grateful. Naruto laughed, obviously amused by his servant's gluttony. I never thought that I would be praised for my cooking skills, of all things. I must say, you are a remarkable cook, master. The man in the apron had a sad, nostalgic expression on his face. Legacy of a misspent youth. I spent so much time living alone that I had to learn how to cook for myself. After a period of silence between the master and the servant, the whiskered blonde's happy disposition and smile reappeared. How does that sound? Naruto said, giving his servant a soft smile before returning to his pantry. I'll just cook one of everything then. Saber, you're drooling. Oh no master, thank you. No issue. Friends support one another in this way, don't they? Yes, the girl in the blue and white outfit said, looking down at her hands as they clasped a tri-pronged kunai, friends. After 3 weeks, Naruto were arriving. The blue-eyed shinobi who had transformed into a magus felt a tiny hand lightly touch his shoulder before moving back to its original spot. Huh? Stupid son. Naruto stretched and yawned, then rubbed the drowsiness from his eyes while muttering curses about how he would destroy that evil, depraved, annoying light. After fully awakening, he realized he was in an airplane seat and that the light was coming from the nearby window. Saber, obviously annoyed by her master's antics, sighed, Naruto, you're making a scene. Am not. Saber's lips formed a tiny smile and said, yes you are. No, Naruto, you're making a scene now. With his trademark foxy grin, the well-dressed magus turned to face his fellow travelers, who were staring at him with curiosity. Whoops. They occasionally engaged in a game to determine who was more mule-headed and stubborn than the other. However, Naruto nearly always lost. He said that he couldn't deny such a cute face victory, which made Saber blush and act ashamed. In an effort to hide her blush and embarrassment, she immediately demanded that he cook her food. Speaking of food. No, Saber. I have nothing to prepare for you this evening. Remember, we need to scout the area first. The servant, obviously annoyed by the whole thing, crossed her arms and sighed. So, tomorrow? Naruto looked almost thoughtful as he said, of course, you know, I thought that you would be more disturbed by the concept of manned flight in general. The Holy Grail gives me the relevant information that I need to function in modern society. Saber responded sternly. He chuckled lightly and said, but even so, you're completely unflappable. I almost lost it when I saw a plane for the first time. The entire idea is not that unusual. In fact, it is. But we won't get into semantics here, he said, adopting a more somber and professional manner. So we've arrived then. So, near Fuyuki City. Yes. And so, war is upon us once again, Naruto sighed. Another battle in a never-ending cycle of battles. But, Naruto, we'll prevail. After all. Saber, I am the best of the servant classes. Additionally, you are among the greatest masters I could have had. As long as the innocent don't get hurt by the war, he walked away, no collateral damage. Of course. As for your wish, the blonde magus went on, you're still thinking about that wish, aren't you? He sighed when he saw that Saber remained silent. Then you are. Just know that I'll be there for you every step of the way, regardless of the choice. With her hands crossed over her lap, Saber said, and I thank you for that. Obviously. Are we not friends? Indeed. We have a friendship. Well, this is the place then, said the blonde master with a smile. For the time being, our new operational base. The place was walled off and had a well-kept garden. As one walked through the garden, they could see that there was a house there, a traditional Japanese house that was actually fairly large, enough to house a family of a respectable size. And everything was kept up nicely. Emiyashiru's house. With bounded fields and at least 10 ceiling arrays, Naruto complained, it took me forever to get down all of those seals. Now, this location is a real fortress. If I don't let anything in, nothing will. When he put his palm on the iron gate, a variety of intricate runes and symbols arranged in a circle instantly started to glow before going out, and the gate opened. We're here then. Naruto Uzumaki and his servant Saber arrived in Fuyuki City 3 weeks after the first servant was called. I have to say that the past several weeks have been. Reluctantly, Saber acknowledged, I'm relaxing. Sweat trickled down the blonde's face as she said, most of that relaxing was us fighting dead apostles and psychopath magi. The servant calmly said, it had its highlights though, even you must admit that. That made Naruto smile. That's right, to begin with, you no longer act like a total ass like you once did. I never did. Saber complained. A heroic spirit such as myself could never act with such improper decorum. With a small twitch of his eyebrow, Naruto gazed at his servant and said, and I don't believe that I am delusional. He opened the door and stopped when he saw what was inside. Old man Zell. What the hell are you doing here? He uttered in a flat voice. Can't a teacher greet his student? Zelretch twitched angrily from his seat. The tea was steaming next to him, so he picked it up and took a sip. I would like to know why you are here, he said calmly, looking at his teacher. You know damn well that you don't make random house calls all that often. With a shrug, the deceased apostle ancestor said, I need to talk. Roughly. Not to you, he said, dismissively waving a hand. To your servant. Unfortunately, Saber, who knew the elderly vampire through her master, was still unable to accept that someone as strong as Kisher Zelretch Schweinord could occasionally be as immature as a 5-year-old. However, even her master Naruto, who was one of the strongest people she knew, had his share of immature moments. Someone who could take on a natural force head on was obviously not to be taken lightly. Level of scale? Naruto asked. With a casual sound, Zelretch said, 5 to 7-ish. That's actually quite serious there. Naruto sighed, raising an eyebrow. Do I have to be there for this whole sham? It would be better if you did not. With a sigh, the blonde said, well, I do need to buy some cooking supplies. I'm going to leave now. Naruto. Are you going to be okay by yourself? The blonde in the suit nodded, I'll be all right. Assassin is the only other servant that has been called upon thus far, and I am sure that I can deal with him if necessary. Zelretch gave a cheeky wave and said, then go buy ingredients to cook delicious food with. With a sigh, Naruto walked out of the house, leaving a stone-faced ghost and an elderly man behind. After he was gone, Zelretch said, I suppose that you want to hear what I have to say, isn't that right? That would be a reasonable assumption, yes. The second magic's master sighed and said, very well then, it's about the brat. Naruto. With a toothy grin, Zelretch said, oh, so you like him then? 3 weeks ago, you wouldn't have called him by name. Why, I wonder, did she let the Icy King be friendly with her master? Even if you are my master's teacher, it is none of your business what I call and do with my master, Saber said, blushing slightly and averting her gaze. Does this drivel have a purpose? Actually, yes. Zelretch's cheerful expression vanished. Really, it's more of a request. At the very least, don't harm him without a valid reason. What do you mean? Naruto loved his precious people very much so. Backstabbing or betraying a comrade is against every rule in his book. Additionally, he is extremely protective, even to the point of suicidal, of people he views as precious. I know for a fact that he views you as a partner and friend, Zelretch said, his eyes softening slightly. That boy places no value in his own life. Saber closed her eyes and let out a small sigh. Isn't he a special creature? He is aware that I am a knight, but still, he doesn't think I'm anything but human, and Invades someone's life and insists on friendly relations. Her lips quirked up as she said, I can say with confidence that he is a very good friend and partner on the battlefield. He is a respectable person overall, even if his tactics in combat are dubious. He hasn't ignored me or lied to me. On the contrary, he has tried his hardest to communicate with me. That is the effect of Naruto. He transforms people, doesn't he? He lacks the mindset but has all the charisma of a king. When he gets serious in battle, he is terrifying, Saber said, raising an eyebrow. In everyday life, it's odd how someone who has experienced so much can still be so carefree. For once, Zelretch took his words seriously. I'm concerned about him. He seems more motivated lately, more broken, if you will. As you are aware, he has been taking on more challenging, riskier, and sickening. His one weakness is that he has no value in his own life, Saber sighed. It is utterly perplexing for someone with such a pure soul to think he is that unworthy. You thought you weren't worthy, didn't you? Zelretch laughed. It is what I stated. Naruto transforms individuals. It's completely unexplainable, Saber sighed. Now, I don't know what I want. Even though I am destined to have no future, a part of me still longs to create a better past, but another part of me longs for the future. It's frustrating. And yet, even if it was only for a short time, I have him to thank for that. The blonde with the green eyes stared out a window at the street. I was able to have all of this. There was more quiet, just the chatter of people on the streets and the roaring of a city, of contemporary civilization. Saber, look after him. Losing a source of entertainment and one of the few people who can tolerate me would be devastating. But above all, please protect him from his own contradictory desires and from himself. I will, you know that. Zelretch got up and left the room as she sighed, a sound of complete contentment and relaxation. I would have even if you hadn't asked me, she said. In any case, he is a better person than most men could ever hope to be, she muttered, her smile remaining nostalgic, tragic, and lovely. As she stood up, her white blouse and blue skirt rustled. Salvation is a prayer I will grant my master as a knight, a hero, and a friend. Ultimately, if I didn't, what sort of servant would I be? With a sigh, Naruto said, now it starts. Arturia, he said, tossing a manila file onto the small table that housed the master and servant. So, should we get ready for war? The King of Knights? With a sigh, the servant said, you know that I dislike all of this planning. If you remember, most of our battle victories were due to superior planning, Naruto said, raising an eyebrow. True, she said after pausing. So, have you identified every master? As of 3 hours ago, I was able to uncover our opponents and who we will be fighting, thanks to my trusty network of spies. He laughed. And you say that intel is overrated. Naruto. Battle was a serious business, so the shorter blonde said bluntly, without any sense of humor, the data. He really was an outspoken person, and as her master got ready to go into lecture mode, Saber rolled her eyes and he mentally prepared himself. Ah, yes. As everyone is aware, each Grail war has 7 masters for 7 different classes. The Tasaka, Matu, and Ainsburn are 3 of the founding families. 1 representative is sent by the Magus Association, and the Grail determines the remaining masters. According to what my spies have informed me, it should be quite intimidating to see this lineup of masters. He spread 5 images across the table after opening the folder. From what I can tell, these are the ones that the Grail has selected to fight in this war. Tokiomi Tasaka, the head of the Tasaka family, is a master. They have hired a person named Karitsugu Emiya from the Ainsburns. Kenneth Archibald L. Meloy was sent by the Magus Association. Naruto scowled and said, he's a jerk. Putting idiots aside. Waver Velvet, one of Archibald's students, is a rival who has actually succeeded in stealing his teacher's catalyst. And lastly, surprisingly, a priest from the burial agency. Kirei Kotomine is his name. The blonde with spiky hair inhaled deeply. Karyamatu is the Matu master, but I haven't really been able to get much information on him. Most of this is new, his servant said, wincing as she folded her hands in her laps. Until today, I had never even heard of 3 of these names. What can I say about the secretive and annoying nature of Magi? Even though my informants are excellent, they are not all powerful. Fair enough. How would you rate their levels of danger? Naruto hummed, thinking deeply. The L. Meloy, I can defeat with extreme ease. Velvet is a young magus, inexperienced. Tasaka is a skilled magus, however, he is predictable, too set in his ways. Really, what it comes down to. Kotomine and Emiya. Personally, I think that Emiya is quite possibly the most dangerous master in this entire war. Saber's eyebrow went up. Are you sure? Barring myself, yes. His expression remained entirely serious, demonstrating that he wasn't joking when he said Kiritsugu was lethal. The expression on Naruto's face was hard, stony-faced, and he said, "The reason for this is because Emiya has a reputation. They being the Magus Association, call him the Magus Killer. Reputation? Emiya Kiritsugu, last scion of the Emiya family. Free lance assassin, well known for hunting dead apostles and sealing designates. Notable in the fact that he does not view himself as a magus, and he is damn good at his job. However, the reason why I view him as dangerous is because he reminds me of a blue-eyed, blonde-haired boy, oh so long ago." He grumbled. "That man is what I could have become. He will do anything to kill his target, anything for the sake of the mission." Saber scowled. "You mean then, that he is?" "Yes. He is similar to me, once upon a time, except for the fact that I would never betray my allies or endanger the innocent right now, though I have in the past. This man. He is what I was, and that is what terrifies me, because that man had a habit of killing innocents and those only vaguely related to his targets in order to kill his target in the first place. I am fairly certain that there has not been a single cowardly trick he has not used in the history of being a mercenary. If he deems a tactic would be enough to kill his opponent or lure them into the open, he would use it regardless of how many people would be caught in the crossfire." Master and servant sat silently together. Kiritsugu is the most dangerous master. He has backing from the Ainsburn, and so, he should be able to procure a catalyst that can summon a servant that is truly exceptional in nature. He is an assassin, a well-trained and skilled one, and most importantly, he is not bound by the rules and regulations of magi, and he most certainly does not possess the same mindset as one. "I see." Saber's slow response, "Can you beat him?" Naruto chuckled. He gave me a vicious, predatory smile and said, "Of course, in a fair battle. But that man will not fight fair. But I should be able to, even if the odds are against me. Besides, I am not a magus either. I am an old soldier, an assassin by upbringing, and I have seen a world at war, and conquered the world. Unless the conditions are truly unfavorable, none of the masters should truly be a threat." Saber gave a nod. "Of course. Masters, ordinary humans, should not be able to fight servants head-on." She replied bluntly. "And if I may say, you are not an ordinary human, by any definition of the word." "That's correct. We will win the war, Saber. That is our pact. Our promise to one another. I am just saying, and reminding you. Do not underestimate the opponent. Never, ever underestimate the enemy. Remember when you sparred with me, Saber?" The servant let out a disgruntled grunt. "You are the clear exception to the norm, Master. Besides, even if you were able to keep up with me, at best, you merely tied. Regardless." He clenched his fingers and said, "The servants. They'll be the biggest issue here. I do not know what catalyst Meloy and Velvet have. I know that after Zelretch appropriated Avalon, the Ainsburns have obtained a shard of wood. Yes, wood, as an artifact. The Matu, I have no idea, and Tasaka was recorded as buying a fossilized snake skin." Saber gritted her teeth. "So, we have absolutely no idea what servants most of the masters have." Naruto whispered, "At least we know the identities of the masters. My spies are only human. Still fallible. No one is perfect, didn't I tell you that already?" She sighed, "Well then, are we to retire?" He sighed, "Yeah, I'm feeling sleepy. I'll get on unsealing all of our stuff, and we'll scout around the city tomorrow." He stood up. "Night, Saber." "Good night, Naruto." Naruto had a dream. In his dream, he saw a hill of swords, knights, blood, screaming, and swords glinting across the battlefield. He also had a dream about a king on that sword hill. That king was engaged in combat with her son. Because her sheath had been taken, the king was having trouble. The dreadful figure of the other Red Knight was yelling in utter rage. The Red Knight wanted to know why he couldn't be king, why he wasn't worthy, and why he wasn't permitted to be the heir. Still unflappable, the King of Knights spoke. "I did not despise you. I did not give you the throne for one reason. You lacked the capacity of a king." Red and blue engaged in combat until the blue figure pierced the red one with her spear. When the bloody knight's helmet fell to the floor, a face that matched the king's was revealed. F.A. There. At least once, the Red Knight attempted to put his hands on the flawless king, but his wish was denied. He passed away quickly and collapsed to the ground, but not before that King of Knights had received one last cruelty. A sword appeared. A sword dropped. And the unidentified son's unwilling hand killed a king by cutting him down. Naruto had a dream about this scene. King Arthur's passing and her dream. After 2 days. Master. Naruto sighed and looked down at his hand, the one with the stylized sword engraved on it, saying, I felt it. It is done then. The last of the heroic spirits have been summoned. Both he and Saber had sensed it. Several servants had been called in yesterday. One more today. So it really begins. The war has started. Muttered Naruto. It has. Shall we be going out again, Naruto? We shall. Very well then. Naruto chuckled a little at how incredibly cute his servant was in the morning as Saber yawned blearily from where she was sitting and stretched like some slothful cat. Naruto, I require sustenance. Coming right up. As a result, Saber readied herself to fight in the breakfast battle. A normal day in their lives, since they had become used to this everyday schedule. She let out a sigh. And now it seems as if those halcyon days are over. At least I have not been resting on my laurels this entire time. The blonde servant experienced relief and excitement at the prospect of a battle, as well as regret and sadness that this brief period of relative peace was now over. Relief that the war could finally start and that the wait was finally over. Immediately after, she felt ashamed that she would think such a thing because, although she was reluctant to acknowledge it, the past few weeks had been among the happiest of her life. But because she was the king of knights Arturia and a servant, Saber was obligated to put her duty before her own comfort. Because her upbringing demanded no less, and her pride and honor demanded no less. But for now, these final moments, this short break before the war, would be enjoyable to her. I wonder, what will Naruto cook for breakfast? After completing their inspection of the Matu residence, the servant and master pair discovered that neither was present. Naruto frowned and said, TCH. What a waste of time. Where could Matu be, anyway? I haven't seen or heard of him since he summoned his servant. Naruto was wearing one of his all-black suits, which had been specially tailored to meet his exacting standards for combat. He was now silently incensed at having spent 3 hours traveling to the Matu residence only to have that effort be in vain, and he had multiple sealing scrolls hidden away in small compartments on said suit. Saber let out a sigh. In addition, she wore a black suit that was nearly form-fitting. How did Naruto get her measurements? Shinobi are adept at using their visual senses to measure objects' widths and lengths. We'll just accept that. Going on. How annoying. Muttered Naruto. Well then. We might as well check out the Ainsburn castle before calling it a day. Koaneth's hideout was so ridiculously easy to find that it is quite laughable, and I don't feel like traipsing to Waver's place of residence. When a woman with white hair passed by, Naruto blinked. Absently, he observed that she had pale skin, red eyes, and a white coat. However, he was unable to see the woman's face. Saber. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that is an Ainsburn homunculus. That is a homunculus. But I thought that. Naruto squinted at the white-haired woman as she left, asking, Emiya Kuritsugu is the Ainsburn master, so why? There is something about her presence, something. Some presence that signifies, not human. That is ominous and foreboding. He ignored it. He sighed as he realized, she cannot be a master though. Someone. Observing him. Saber. We are currently being observed, aren't we? Yes. 2 of them, on the roofs. Should I eliminate them? Naruto gave a headshake. No need for that. They don't seem to have any hostile intentions. However, I believe that we should head over to the Tasaka residence now. We have already scouted the Ainsburn's castle yesterday, so another trip there would be redundant. If we continue, we would attract a little more attention than I am comfortable gathering as well. You do realize that it will be dark by the time we arrive? Naruto looked at his servant strangely. Do you care what time of day it is? Will scouting the Tasaka residence impede on dinner? No, it should be fairly quick, then I don't care. Naruto palmed his face and moaned in sheer frustration, a hint of humor mixed with the annoyance. You are a glutton, Saber. A white-masked assassin was impaled by a spear and a sword, and there was a loud explosion. Saber turned pale. That's Archer. Naruto just gave a grateful whistle. Damn, that was impressive. The 2 were presently watching the Tasaka mansion from tree branches. It seems that the master of assassin had attempted to enter the mansion, most likely in order to murder Tokiomi Tasaka, the archer's master. When the other servant appeared, the idiot had, stealthily, moved to the jewel keeping the defenses in place. Rising like a flaming flame was Archer, a tall, dignified young man with golden hair. His face was elegant and he was handsome. His eyes, which were red like blood, were obviously not human, and they radiated a mysterious light that could kill people. It was said that his perfect, golden, proportioned body exuded majesty. The fact that the servant was dressed in a full suit of gold armor added to and elevated this image, giving our protagonists a strong first impression. The archer's effortless dismissal of assassin obviously upset Saber, who muttered, "Those were noble phantasms. Is that really an archer class?" Naruto let out a sigh. It seems as if Tokiomi has summoned a very powerful servant indeed, if he possesses numerous noble phantasms. Let me see if I can get a good look at his stats, he continued. Naruto sighed again. Oh my. Golden Rule rank A, Divinity rank B, Charisma A+, and Independent Action rank A. My. This guy is a monster, isn't he? The blonde magus narrowed his eyes at the archer and said, multiple noble phantasms, of moderate quality too. Clearly a high-ranked servant, if he has that many. The golden servant made the decision to voice his displeasure at that point. Oi, mongrels in the tree! Show yourselves, lest you suffer the king's wrath. After giving Saber a somber look, Naruto and Saber descended from the tree. Ultimately, neither desired to be skewered by so many swords that were floating around. Now, explain yourselves. What gave you the right to stare at the rightful king? Placing a restraining hand on his servant's shoulder to prevent her from condemning them both to Archer's wrath, Naruto mentally prepared himself to come up with a solution to their current unpleasant predicament. First of all, this archer appeared to be a very conceited and haughty individual. Thus, buttering up was necessary. He had called himself a king many times, so. My apologies, King of Heroes. The blonde with the blue eyes said with ease. My companion and I were merely curious as to what could cause such a cacophony. Forgive our intrusion. The man in the golden armor arched a graceful eyebrow. So, you recognize a true king at first glance. That redeems you to some degree, I suppose. Wow, that really did work. However, it does not explain your intrusion, and your cowardice puts you below my feet. Explain quickly, lest you find yourself with no limbs. Naruto gripped his servant's shoulder with a tighter grip. He sank into a low bow, and after glancing at Saber, she reluctantly bowed as well. Many apologies, King of Heroes. As I have stated before, we were merely curious as to what the cause of all of that noise was. Once we discovered it, we distanced ourselves from your battlefield so as not to impede on your slaughter of the mongrels. Forgive this man's cowardice, majestic king. The blonde in the suit was annoyed at the thought of submitting to such a haughty person, but he also preferred to live and didn't want to fight right now. It was too troublesome, as Shikamaru would have said. There was silence until the golden archer burst out laughing. You were quite skilled in wordplay, mongrel. How amusing. Very well then, I shall let you and your companion live, if simply for the fact that you have entertained me. You had better be on your way though. The patience and forgiveness of the king is not limited. Many thanks, King of Heroes. A confused archer was left behind as the two disappeared with a burst of yellow light. How entertaining. Perhaps, there will be some form of amusement in this charade. Two figures emerged from the house Naruto had bought, and there was a flash of gold. Naruto let out a breath. He looked at his companion and said, that was close. We're quite lucky to be unscathed. Sorry about that, Saber. But we had to get away somehow. Saber, who was about to unleash a massive tirade, stopped right away. She sighed with fatigue and slumped into a nearby chair as her eyes softened at her master's genuine, contrite expression. To be honest, she was simply too exhausted and hungry to argue right now. You are forgiven, Naruto. My thanks to you too, however, you must make me dinner, immediately. After going pale, the blonde quickly recovered. Damn. Well, I guess it is to be expected. Indeed. It is. The battlefield was a bloody place. Demons, ghouls, creatures from the dark abyss of purgatory. Saber shook her head and swung her sword at another undead. This is what my master does. This battle was not one of glory. Killing things that weren't superior to animals was not honorable. It was kill or be killed on this battlefield. Kill or perish. She brought her invisible blade across the neck of another ghoul, turning her head to avoid it. Like a puppet without strings, the headless body fell to the ground. But there were more. A burning village cast a shadow over hundreds of the abominations. Saber was about to jump forward when she caught a glimpse of light out of the corner of her eye. Unnoticed, a short knife swung past her and ripped into the skull of an undead. You missed one, Saber. Her master was that. The blonde was wearing his usual suit, with the exception that the sleeves were stained red, and he had an unusually serious expression on his face. His arm was still extended from when he threw the knives, and he had two more in his right hand. My apologies, master. Ma, don't worry, there's no time for that sort of thing. Right now, we have a job to do. Understood. Leave it to me. The blonde with blue eyes let out a sigh. You know, you're not alone, right? Not anymore, at any rate. I can fight alone, master. Your safety is paramount. Two opponents are harder to face than one, you do realize that, right? He sighed again. Well, looks like. I might have to prove that teamwork trumps any ridiculous notion that you have of fighting all by yourself. He reached for the scroll. Here they come. Saber. Just don't get killed. Naruto's mouth became thinner. Believe me, it is they who will have to fear. And master and servant hurled themselves at the mass of resurrected dead with a silent battle cry. When Saber thought back on that evening, she would recall it as the first time she had fought alongside her master. Nor would it be the final instance. One more patrol, one more. And Saber was undoubtedly a little irritated by this incessant walking. Naruto, I must ask. What are we doing right now? To say exactly, what are we doing? Ah, didn't you know? One of my shadow clones saw a master heading to the docks. And just now, I saw that Kaneth guy heading in that same direction. Saber trembled. Clone shadows. The blonde had mentioned in passing that they could make clones using only OD and mana, but to see it in action, it was really frightening. In the magical world of today, such a thing really shouldn't be possible. Half of what Naruto could do could not be duplicated by a typical magus. However, by all standards, he was anything but normal. To begin with, the ability to use clones to directly stream information into one's brain was not available to regular magi. Furthermore, ordinary magi were not fortunate enough to possess a conceptual weapon that could cure their aneurysms from the inevitable meltdown that happens when too much information is downloaded into a brain that can only process so much, or a residual regeneration factor that could accomplish the same thing, albeit slowly. Naturally, it was never pleasant to have your brain literally start to melt down from too much information. But we'll talk more about that later. Thus, we find our protagonists wandering in the direction of Fuyuki City's docks, only to stop upon hearing the sound of metal on metal. A battle then? Thought Naruto. Very close too. Saber, do you think we should engage then, or observe? The smaller blonde with the sword hesitated, while she was energized and prepared to fight. No. We will most likely be interrupting a duel between servants, and I would not be the one to impede in an honorable duel. For now then, let us merely observe. I agree, if only because we will be able to gather more information this way. Naruto sighed. Naruto trailed off. We need a vantage point then. Ah, what is this then? The best place to watch the battle on the docks was from a nearby bridge called Fuyuki Bridge, where two bulls, strangely enough, were pulling a chariot pulled by a larger man and a smaller one. The bigger man wore bronze armor with fringes and greaves that exposed his arms and thighs, and a red cloak. But both this armor and this cape were adorned in a way that was appropriate for a nobleman or other member of the royal family. His height easily exceeded 2 meters, and he had a tanned complexion, red hair, and a beard. He was also incredibly well muscled, which made him appear as though he could kill wild animals with just his hands. The other man, who was essentially a boy, was the complete opposite. He had a slight build, greenish-black eyes, and greenish-black hair that reached his shoulders. He was dressed in magus. Appropriate formal attire. In comparison to Naruto or his companion, he essentially had the appearance of a small child. The fact that this was no typical pair was painfully clear. Naruto whispered to himself, "Oh ho, master and servant, eh? Naruto, should we eliminate them?" He stopped when he saw the bigger man turn to face him and start waving merrily. They don't seem to be hostile. Leave them be for now. He turned to his servant and said, "Well, that's a clear invitation if I ever saw one. Shall we? It would be rude for us not to accept this heartfelt invitation, unless you believe the bridge to be booby-trapped." The blonde with the spiky hair shook his head. "Doubt it. The general impression I'm getting off of those guys. They're not the type to do anything like that." The two blondes in suits approached the mammoth of a man who was still smiling and his shaking companion with composure. "Ah. Greetings there," he said boldly without hesitation. "Here to watch the fight then?" Calmly, Naruto said, "Indeed." He trailed off, saying, "Only to observe, nothing more. Are you rider then?" Naruto dead. Panned as everyone on the bridge halted and gazed at him. "He has a chariot. A chariot, of all things. What else could he be? Caster." There was more silence, but then Ryder burst out laughing and Saber smiled. The smaller green-eyed woman said smugly, "As expected of my master's deductive skills. Truly, a force to be reckoned with." The Ryder laughed, "Ahahaha, I think I like you, boy, quite perceptive, aren't you?" Naruto's casual response was, "I try. Shall we introduce ourselves to each other then? Or is there no need for such matters?" I am the servant summoned under the class of rider in this Holy Grail war. Alexander, the king of conquerors. The smaller boy turned pale. With a comical wave of his arms, he screamed, "Oi, dumb.ass, don't go telling them that." He was obviously horrified by his servant's lack of tact. His efforts were rewarded only with a flick to the forehead that sent him sprawling across the bridge. Men like you. How fortunate. I can sense great strength in both of you, care to join my army as my underlings. Saber jerked. No, I must say no, I have to think about my pride as a king, and swearing to you would be a betrayal of my honor. After a brief pause, Naruto said, I would. That proposal must be rejected. I'm sorry, Alexander. He actually had a sheepish look on his face. But I have to consider both my servants and my own desires. Furthermore, I do not think that I would do well under the rule of another. Such a shame, Alexander sighed. I would not object to the idea of being allies in this war though. But isn't that the problem? Only one winner can emerge. The muscular servant sighed again, sadly. How sad. Only one king can conquer the world, not two. It's a pity, Naruto muttered. If that is to be, then so be it. It is obvious that you have a heroic spirit that is nearly unmatched. Actually, though, you would most likely be more than a match for my servant. Alexander gave a snort. That young girl? Naruto interrupted Saber just as she was about to respond. You'd be wise to avoid underestimating that young girl. Her legend is sung all across the world, and she is a great and noble leader of men. She is the champion of an eternal dream and has battled against evil and dark forces. She is. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, by the way. Sabrier is the best of those servant classes. He paused. Since you've taken the time to introduce yourself, I'll follow suit. Waver looked at Saber and blanched. Say, really, these statistics are. Naruto, you praise me too much, Saber said, raising an eyebrow. I aim to please. Well, that's a challenge. How thrilling. What about you, boy? If the way you hold yourself is any indication, you are obviously not your typical human. Me? He dismissed Iskander's inquiry with a brief chuckle and that self-deprecating remark. I am just an old soldier, chasing a stupid wish. I see. Okay, then, I take it you're here to watch. Yes. Let's examine the types of opponents that the Holy Grail may present. Saber and Naruto were able to see the fighters for the first time after the two figures had just finished another battle. Metal grinding against metal, armor against lance, sword against lance. It was clear that one was a lancer and the other a swordsman. The one with the lances, yes, there were two of them, was very attractive, with features that could captivate any woman and probably a few men. He was dressed in a dark teal outfit, and his dual spears were wrapped in cloth, one in golden yellow and the other in crimson red. Curiously, Naruto sniffed the air, asking, what's that smell? Then, mystic face. That attractive face that draws people in. That is not natural, Saber muttered, and I would probably die too if it weren't for my high magic resistance. Interesting, fascinating. But he is by himself. His master is where? With a grunt, Iskander said, probably hiding, like a rat. Oh my. It's too bad. Naruto paled and nearly fell backwards in shock as he turned his attention to the other figure, and he saw that Saber had actually stepped back in complete surprise. Is that what? With a look of surprise more than anything else, Saber whispered out. That's, said Naruto, narrowing his eyes. While the other figure held a silver blade, again ornately decorated, the blade of a knight. It was clad in thick armor that covered its entire frame, silver and ornate, with red cloth mixed with said silver armor. I smell blood there. And that armor. He squinted. Iron from blood. I've seen this figure in the dream sequence before, Saber. Yes. Saber put a hand over her eyes and sighed, it's definitely that person. Such misfortune. Dude. That servant. Who is he? That's Mordred, Saber replied to Iskander. King Arthur's son, and my murderer. Alexander wasn't a stupid man. He was bold and arrogant, which only a king could be, but he wasn't foolish enough to overlook the obvious connection. I understand. It's unbelievable that the King of Knights would be a young girl. You'd be wise to avoid underestimating me, Ryder. Realize that just because I'm a woman doesn't mean I won't spill your blood on my blade. You should behave more like your master, you know, the big servant said, letting out a sigh and wiping his ear with his finger. He appears to be a fairly decent man. The servants fell silent as Naruto broke the commotion, saying, it's begun. Lancer's going to unleash it. You mean? He is in the process of revealing his noble phantasm. To be able to parry all of my attacks like you have been doing shows that you possess great skill. The Teal Knight whispered cautiously, I must commend you. Enough, idiot. Then, keep talking so I can cut you down with my blade. Avenger sneered, its tone betraying its condescension and malice. Suddenly, loud and commanding, another voice rang out. That's enough, Lancer. Now that you've had your fun, put an end to this conflict as soon as possible. You are free to employ your noble phantasm. I understand, my lord, said the Lance's servant, nodding. I'm going for the kill now, he said, removing the wrappings from his red and golden spears. At the very least, will you not tell me the name of your class? Very well then, I shall honor that request, said the other Red Knight, the one with the helmet, with a shrill, irritating laugh that sounded more like someone dying. My course is Avenger. Everyone in the vicinity gave a little flinch at this. Avenger. In a quiet whisper, Lancer said, Who knew? I had assumed you were a rider or saber, but Avenger? Complete it, Lancer. The voice ordered. My lord, of course. He cocked his head to the side and said, That helmet hides who you are, doesn't it? I'm going for your throat now, Avenger. That is to say, if I were to glimpse your face, your identity would be obvious to me. I sincerely doubt it, but you are welcome to try, regardless, said Avenger with a snort. With a sigh, the Teal Knight started to move away from his other spear, saying, Very well then. He tried to use his red spear, but Avenger's sword blocked it. TCH. All right, then. Avenger, you have only one sword. Subsequently, he attempted to impale Avenger with his other golden spear. Avenger shifted to the side at the last second, resulting in a terrible screech of metal on metal coming from the spot where the golden spear scraped along its armored flank. With reluctant approval, Lancer said, Good reflexes. That armor. Difficult, difficult. Remain motionless and allow me to murder you. With both hands on its sword, Avenger snarled. He changed hands and tried to strike again, but Avenger parried him, saying, Is that part of your noble phantasm, then? TCH. The two knights battled back and forth, forwards and backwards, gaining advantages and quickly losing them. Lancer had the advantage of having two weapons rather than just one, and he was noticeably faster than Avenger. Avenger, on the other hand, was a little slower and had the advantage of brute strength and armor that continued to deflect glancing blows from both lances. Eventually, Avenger attempted to block a stab to the chest from the golden spear with its right arm, but misstimed it and ended up with a spear through that limb. HNGH. Avenger, Irisfield, who had been watching the fight from a distance for a while, cried out. A woman. Heal me. I'm making an effort. Yes, I have. You should be healed from your wound, it's recovered. With a sigh, Naruto said, It's begun. Waver gave this weird master a strange look. What has? Saber nodded, Lancer's last attack. He's very good at what he does. The battle will soon be over because of Avenger's wound. Isn't that advantageous? The large servant Iskander slammed his foot against the floor with a disapproving grunt, causing his master to eep and bow his head. No, considering that all of the other servants haven't been revealed yet, Avenger losing on the first night is probably not the best outcome. Ryder nodded in agreement with Naruto's statement, saying, Alexander and I both hope to see more of them come out. Waver looked up and said, That's right, and if Avenger falls, it will be too late. Is it too late? Alexander explained his plan for their attack on the servants by saying, the plan was to attack once they'd knocked each other out. He questioned his servant's word choice. Is that not cowardly, then? Saber blinked. King of Knights, don't judge me, since it would be simpler to fight them collectively than one. On .1. I had hoped that more servants would have accepted Lancer's challenge. Saber's face took on a rather irritated look as a result. Some of us happen to specialize in one-on-one confrontations, Ryder. I would really love to duel with Avenger and Lancer because they are both brave warriors, unlike those who just observe and wait for the ideal moment to attack from the shadows. If my assumptions are correct, even you two have a chance. Before I have a chance to fight you, none of you should perish. But isn't that what the fight is about? The goal of the Grail's war is to murder each other. Waver was sent spinning when his servant flicked his head in response to his yelling. It's obvious that Alexander needs a good fight to win this conflict. Similar to his past, he hopes to win this battle without anyone doubting his capacity in the future, Naruto noted. Yes. What I truly seek is to have truly conquered this war with all my strength. He drew out his sword and swiped at the sky, which opened in a torrent of lightning that channeled through the metal of the bridge. His great chariot came through the tear in the sky as Waver held onto the bridge for dear life. We wait no longer. We shall participate, boy. He paused. King of Knights, would you and your master wish to ride with us? I have my own methods of arriving, Ryder. Saber replied easily, though I must thank you for your courtesy. Oi, oi. The youngest in the little group was essentially having a panic attack. Isn't this dangerous? Alexander sniffed. You can always stay behind if you're too scared. Are you scared then? Hearing that, Waver made up his mind. As if his life depended on it, he yelled, I'll go. Take me, damn it. The servant grinned as he dragged Waver onto the chariot. Oh my, that's my master, he declared as he swiftly ascended into the sky, leaving behind an irritated king and a perplexed Magus. What an interesting pair. Sighing, Saber said, maybe. I don't think they'll withstand my blade and your for very long, but a unique brand of magic craft. After giving this statement some thought, Naruto shrugged and said, who knows? Well, we'll just have to wait and see. With a hint of irritation, Avenger gazed at its wound. A spear that causes wounds that don't heal. A mole under your eye and another spear. I guess I should feel honored to be up against you, dear Mood of the Radiant Face, the first of the Fianna Knights. It would be better if you were to give me your name now that you know mine. You will know my name in time, for now that I know this, I will be able to cut you down with impunity, the Bloody Knight said, laughing once more. You say this when you have lost the use of one arm. Even if its face were hidden, Avenger exuded a sense of pride and vowed to use violence and retaliation, saying, I have suffered worse, it is of no consequence. But before they could engage, a thunderclap echoed through the landscape, and a big chariot with a tall, muscular man at the helm fell between them. Irisfiel was stunned. A chariot. The chariot was between lances, and Avenger's sword, surrounded by lightning, pulled by two bulls, and had a burly man at its helm. You two. Put down your weapons, for a real king is on the way. The servant nodded in agreement after surveying Lancer and Avenger and noting their astonishment and surprise at his arrival. My name is Alexander. Conqueror King. In this Holy Grail war, I've been given the title of Rider. Everyone was truly taken aback at that point. Since revealing one's identity could be a crucial part of any battle strategy, no servant would want to do so during the Holy Grail war. Saber was stunned by this servant's boldness and, in her view, foolishness on the bridge, and Naruto suppressed a laugh. This guy appeals to me. I have no idea why, but I do. What an idiot. To so readily reveal his name. Saber whispered, yes, she had disclosed her identity as well, but only because Alexander had done so first, and it was an inadvertent and merely polite gesture. In reality, she was merely attempting to defend such a grave error. You can't claim to despise this man, Saber, Naruto muttered. I won't comment on the situation. Very chilly. Additionally, you disclosed who you are. It was unintentional. It was an accident, a mistake. It was merely a slip of the tongue, the blonde servant exclaimed. Naruto teased, someone is in denial. With a faint flush on her face, Saber turned her nose to the sky and said, I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, in a manner reminiscent of the apathetic monarch. If you are adamant, then, let's watch the fight. You idiot, what are you doing? Waver let out a cry and received another blow to the forehead. Observing your conflict. We have been united by fate to battle for the Grail, but first, I have a question. How about giving me the Grail and enlisting in my army? I will treat you both as my friends, and we will both enjoy the thrill of conquering the world together, Alexander said with a smile. You would dare interrupt my battle for something as stupid as that? Lancer glared at the burly servant after blinking. My lord has my allegiance. Rider, not with you. With an apparently irritated grunt, Avenger said, what a clown. Your trivial aspirations of conquering the world don't interest me. Negotiations have failed once again, sighed Alexander. Blinking in surprise, Irisfiel said, negotiation? You basically demanded that they swear allegiance to you when you entered. Exactly. It was preparation. A moment's silence. Planning is not that. Waver, Irisfiel, Lancer, and Avenger shouted at him. Yes, it is. The voice that had given Lancer the order said, so, you were the one that stole my catalyst, Waver Velvet. That is. Irisfiel said, her eyes widening. Waver Velvet, I am in awe. The idea that you would dare to take my sacred relic. The master of Lancer's disguised voice said, and have the courage to join the field of heaven. I genuinely wished for the happiness of my poor, cherished pupil. Waver, a person as unimpressive as you should only be able to enjoy the quiet and secure existence of the average person. Thus, as your instructor, it is my responsibility to teach you in private. I'll have to teach you about the pain and fear that are involved in this most sacred of rituals, the smooth, greasy voice cried. Waver was so terrified of his former teacher, Kenneth Archibald L. Melloy, that he found it impossible to express his feelings. That is, until Ryder said something. So, you were supposed to be my master, right? How disgusting, you could never be my master, Alexander growled. The only person who has the courage to accompany me into combat has that privilege. Not one who would lurk in the shadows out of cowardice. There was silence, and the only emotion visible in the black was that of a haughty noble who was furious at Alexander's foolishness. You dare? Are all servants this disrespectful of their superiors? Ignoring him, the red-clad servant said, on that note. Hello. Every one of you who is hiding. Show yourself right away. Or do you lack the courage to do so? You must reveal your faces to me, Alexander, the king of conquerors. Ryder. Who in the world are you speaking to? Lancer said gravely. You didn't believe that nobody had noticed your entire battle, did you? Not to mention the other servant watching this assembly. I am aware that Saber and her master are currently watching the battle. After making that declaration, golden dust gathered atop a lamppost to form the Golden King that had created such a commotion on the first night of the conflict. Waver exclaimed, isn't that? In shock. Everyone on the docks gazed at the golden armored figure, the quintessential king. Irisfield concluded, that's the servant that killed Assassin on the first night of the war. Considering that Saber was not the person Alexander was referring to and that he was obviously not under mad enhancement, this could not be a caster. Archer? Waver whispered. Archer, the servant of the bow, is the last of those 3 knight classes. The golden servant sighed. I did not expect a fool to appear before me and call themselves king, when there is clearly only one king. Me. Why not give yourself a name if you are a real king? To the man on top of the post, Alexander said, no true king should be troubled by giving his name. So, pretender, you would ask me questions? The light beneath his feet went out as he broke it by stomping his foot. Me, the king? The only reason I gave a mongrel a chance at life was because he was able to figure out my true name at first glance. For the rest of you, your blindness will seal your demise if you are unable to recognize me even in the presence of my glory. A golden glow materialized behind him, and 2 weapons emerged from it. Are those? Waver, obviously taken aback, exclaimed, noble phantasms. Those are noble phantasms. Stupid mongrels. So get ready to face a king's wrath. But then a swirl of darkness appeared, a mar in the landscape, a swirl of pure darkness, a black flame that burned fiercely and then dissipated, revealing a black figure, dressed in what might or might not be a knight, cloaked in darkness, shrouded in black, skulking in the shadows. Ho? The Avenger asked, turning its helmed head toward the Black Knight. So, is that Berserker? Lancer chuckled uneasily. Hey, Ryder, are you going to invite him? He doesn't seem the thinking type, Ryder grunted. How strong is he, boy? Waver recoiled a little as he glanced at the Black Knight. I'm not sure, as though a dark cloud were obscuring his statistics. However, he is obviously strong. Everyone's attention was drawn to the black figure, who was obviously frightening the majority of people there. But that shock would not last long, for a tri-pronged knife hissed through the air before making a tiny, thunking sound as it hit the ground. Well, so they're coming. Lancer and Waver had to turn away as a burst of golden light illuminated the battlefield. After the glowing had subsided, 2 figures had emerged, both wearing black suits, both blonde, and both exuding an aura that could only be described as lethal. Silence once more until the taller one, with the blue eyes and spiky hair, burst into a smile. Hey, we apologize for being late. Saber had to pull me back after I got lost on life's journey. There was complete silence as everyone gazed in awe at the blonde with whiskers. Was he suicidal or something? Waver, Lancer, and Kenneth were horrified. Irisfield was taken aback. Alexander was smiling and stroking his beard. Avenger was appropriately taken aback by the spiky blonde and his companion, and Archer. He was obviously irritated. In fact, anything could make Gilgamesh angry. In fact, just gazing at him is enough to earn punishment. One could see a vein pulsing in his head. Yes, Archer, he was furious. Master, you're making a scene, Saber sighed. Once more. Avenger, who had just noticed Saber, turned to her and asked, is that? We're here, aren't we, Mo and Saber? Yes, but your antics are making you look foolish. That sorry, I'm late joke isn't very funny. Yes, Naruto said, blinking. In fact, it is. Even you must acknowledge it. It is rather humorous for those that are not on the opposing end, but that is not the point. Saber paused, considered that, and a semi-pleased expression appeared on her face before it changed back to her impassive one. That made the blonde with the blue eyes sigh. Spoil sport. Where are our manners, I wonder? As you are aware, Servant Saber is at my side. Regarding myself, I'm Naruto Uzumaki, a former shinobi who is now a magician in training and an apprentice to Kisher Zelretch Schweinord, the greatest troll in history. The magi present were taken aback by this. They had all heard that Kaleidoscope had hired an apprentice, interestingly enough. But, this man was a magician? What the devil? Are you a second magic practitioner? Waver pointed a quivering finger at the blonde in the suit and yelled accusingly. Yes. Is something wrong? There's a problem, fuck. Does that statement have any meaning? With obvious boredom, Lancer inquired. Maybe. A sword swung through the air in the direction of our heroes before detonating. Stupid. Do you really think you can keep a king waiting? What a prickly attitude. There is no pardon for this disrespectful act, even if you could identify me right away. Still furious at the antics of his fellow blonde, the Golden King said, mongrels like you should just go back to the dirt where you came from. Naturally, he had another target for his wrath. And you crazy dog. What do you suppose you were observing? A spear and a sword appeared from a golden ripple in the air, glorious and fine in manufacture and design. Return to the earth. A huge cloud of smoke rose as the spear and sword were fired, followed by another explosion. When Archer heard that obnoxious voice coming from an alleyway, he tensed up. Oi, oi. That's a bit rude, don't you think? Very risky as well. What the devil? More shocked than scared, Waver exclaimed. How in the world did he make it all the way over there? After blinking, Naruto put a finger to his lips and grinned. That's a secret. Face. Fault is the result. Mr. Goldie. Pants, meanwhile, was still furious. You dare make fun of me? Would you dare to disobey the king's justice? I don't see a king standing before me, just a petulant brat, Saber said, voicing her opinion. Come down and fight like the king you were if you were one. Naruto grimaced and said, Saber, you just got him madder. And you haven't? Touché. Surprisingly, Archer was either too angry to care or hadn't heard him. An additional imposter. What insolence. More weapons materialized in midair, encircled by those golden ripples. These weapons were of the highest caliber, manufacture, and quality, fit for a king, and there were an abundance of them. Spears, swords, axes, knives, daggers, scythes, halberds, they were all noble phantasms, or at least on the level of one. Archer had them all. But Archer stopped before he could discharge the weapons, and the crazy dog lives, too. Indeed, Berserker had survived the two weapons that Archer had fired. The Black Knight, Spider, webbed with red veins and emitting a menacing cloud of darkness, was emerging from a plume of smoke with a tainted sword in one hand. Ryder whispered, interesting, to have such skill in such a state. Yes, did you miss it back then? Waver, who had nearly forgotten about the heavily armored servant, was startled when Avenger said, but that is not what interests me. He caught that sword and used it to destroy the spear. You fucking mongrels. I'll kill you right now. Before the weapons could fire, however, Archer came to a complete halt, and looked up, clearly annoyed. Retreat. You've got some nerve, Tokiomi, to order a king around like a mere peasant. Archer was almost furious about his forced retreat, but he was powerless to stop it because a command seal had been used, forcing compliance. The weapons all withdrew, the ripples closed, and the few weapons that were still on the ground vanished into golden dust. TCH. Needing to run in this manner. How repulsive. He turned to go, but not before saying a few final words. Mongrels. By our next meeting, make sure you've reduced your numbers because only a real hero would be worthy of observing me. And the two of you. The king sneered one last time before dissolving into golden particles and disappearing. You had better not try the patience of the king a third time. Ryder's low rumble broke the sudden silence. Boy. Naruto, know who exactly was that character? That just confirmed my suspicions, Naruto sighed. That arrogant demeanor, that enormous arsenal of weapons, that golden physique. The world's treasures have only ever belonged to one hero. With a stunned expression, Saber turned to face her master. You mean? Yes. The blonde with whiskers answered, that man is Gilgamesh, king of heroes, and he is Tasaka's servant. He paused, then said, this war is obviously going to be pretty interesting. What are you all going to do now? With obvious nervousness, Avenger took a step forward and said, we meet again, father. Waver turned pale. Hold on, Dad. Saber is a female. Why in the world are you using masculine pronouns when referring to Saber? Waver exclaimed, it's obvious that she's a girl. My father is King Arthur. It is the unavoidable truth, regardless of his gender. Lancer. did you not want to know my name? Avenger. What are you doing? No, pride is at issue here. I'm Mordred, as you can see. Arthur, that bastard offspring of the King of Knights. Avenger growled fiercely. Saber traced an invisible line on her chest, where she had been slashed in combat, and whispered, Mordred. Recalling past traumas, Dad? Avenger put his hand by her side and said, I know that I remember mine. Irisfiel said, so this is the heroic spirit King Arthur. Is that young girl really King Arthur? Lancer questioned with astonishment. There was a momentary silence while everyone considered this. With his savage grin intact, Naruto said, well, then. So, are we going to fight? If that is to be the case, then. After that, we'll just need to perform well, won't we? When a roaring sound drew everyone's attention, Avenger drew her sword and was slowly pushed forward in the same direction as Berserker, who had picked up a lamppost and was charging at the servant and master pair. With a sigh, Naruto pulled out a scroll and said, my, how rude. Saber, should you? Berserker's blow was deflected by his servant, who instantly materialized her invisible weapon in silver armor. Not a problem, master. Saber sighed, although Berserker is quite strong. Naruto opened the scroll and quickly skimmed through it, saying, just hold on, I'll be ready shortly. I guess we'll use this one today. Oi, what are you doing? It is impossible for a master to adopt a servant, Waver shouted. Child, if there is one thing you should know about my master, Saber said, shaking her head at Waver's foolishness. This is it. Never, ever undervalue him. 4. Naruto concluded, it will be the last mistake in your short existence. He then put his hand on a circular seal inside the scroll and directed a tiny amount of OD into it, obscuring everyone's view with a puff of smoke that, when it cleared. No, sword is a better word to describe what Naruto was holding. It was a massive piece of metal, larger than Naruto, shaped like a butcher's knife, with 2 cutouts on the blade itself. One near the top and one near the handle. But the blonde magus was only holding it in one hand despite its enormous bulk. The sword's sole purpose was obviously to kill the enemy. It was heavy and crude, yet elegant in its simplicity. When paired with the blonde's vicious smile, it appeared absolutely terrifying. More introductions, Welcome to Kabikirabocho, shit. Stains. Introducing shit. Stains, Kabikirabocho. You'll get to know me soon, I swear. So, now. And with that, the spiky haired blonde grabbed the handle of his giant blade with another hand, and launched himself at Berserker, causing the black servant to leap backwards in order to avoid the massive decapitating blade. Saber. Which would you prefer? Is it big, bad, and ugly, or smaller, but still ugly? Avenger looks exactly like me, you do realize. Saber twitched. URK. He glared at the Black Knight and blocked another of Berserker's blows, saying, you know that interrupting someone is rude, don't you? He then sent the insane servant flying by slamming the flat of his blade against Berserker's helmet. Obviously, the noise didn't really register in the minds of those present, but it was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. Literally, Kenneth had a pin on him. God knows why, and he dropped it, metal falling from nerveless fingers. I'll return. I must go take out the garbage, I'm sure you can manage Mordred. Go, Saber said, nodding. I possess some. She looked at her master and narrowed her eyes for a moment, saying, I have business to attend to. You'll be fine, won't you? Saber, you are familiar with me. What are your thoughts? I believe. She grinned and said, very well, then. You will be more than fine. I'll let you handle it. As her master prepared to take the charge from the crazed servant, the servant with the sword suddenly sprang forward to engage the irregular servant that had been called. And the battle was joined that night. Steel against steel, flesh against flesh, 2 figures fighting 2 figures, a red knight against a blue knight, a blonde knight in a suit against a twisted knight, and the sound of swords striking swords reverberated, the blades blurring at unnatural speeds. It is all the more astonishing that a typical human could truly compete in this match of heroes because it was not a match of ordinary men, but rather the domain of those who were not human, above humanity, and servants. Ryder growled ponderously, I must say. Those two are fairly powerful. Slack. Jawed, Waver said, no shit. How the devil? What the devil? What the? Yes. Lancer observed, the male is using said blade quite deftly and with relative ease, despite wielding such a huge and ponderous weapon. What is more, is that he is matching Berserker blow for blow, meaning that Naruto character is strong. Ryder concluded Lancer's statement. For a regular person, being able to take on the insane servant head on is quite an achievement. Not to mention, can't you see how well they coordinate? Coordination. Lancer let out a whistle. Yeah, I see it now. Irisveal cocked her head slightly in perplexity. Coordination. Their movements. Do you not notice that their battles coincide with one another, that is to say, the combatants cross paths? Ryder responded. And yet, the both of them are mindful of where the other is. Truly remarkable. The sheer force of Berserker's blows forced Naruto back, and he grunted as he used his enormous sword to deflect another blow. Damn. Going head on won't work, huh? Not even with this blade, he said, dropping his blade, rolling under a swing aimed at his head, and grabbing the handle of Kabikirabocho, bringing the big blade down in an overhead swing. Berserker blocked that right away. The blonde magus moaned in exasperation. Oh, come on, aren't you supposed to be insane? Unless. Oh, you have got to be shitting me. Is it because you were so skilled in life that you can fight like a professional even while under mad enhancement? With a roar, Berserker pushed Naruto's sword back in an attempt to use brute force to crush him. Berserker managed to cut his cheek slightly when Naruto's hold relaxed, the blonde barely avoiding the charred lamppost. And that ability. How troublesome. Ryder nodded over in the observer section. Yes, that ability. That black thing seems to be able to make noble phantasms out of whatever it picks up. In the meantime, Saber and Avenger were engaged in combat. Given that Avenger had a significant cut on one arm, the term, fighting, is, after all, a relative one. Another of Saber's blows clattered against her blade, and the Red Knight grunted. Why so cruel, father? It has been such a long time since we have seen each other. She cocked her head and said, enough, Mordred. If you continue speaking, you may very well die in combat. You will probably die now regardless. Avenger let out a sigh. This wound. How annoying. A spear that deals wounds that can never heal. How irritating. Seeing as it prevents me from killing you, father. Blades deadlocked, green eyes gazing at an emotionless helm, another clash of steel. When last we fought, you told me that I lacked the capacity of a king. Do you still think so, Arthur? Do you still believe that I lack the capacity of a king, as I am able to stand against you whilst handicapped? Do I? The Avenger screamed the final phrase. With a sigh, Saber closed her eyes, exhausted. She said without emotion, I said before, haven't I? I do not despise you. You simply lacked that capacity of the king. This infuriated Mordred even more than Saber had imagined. The king, always about the king. What is the capacity of the king? What is a king? You, who has had his country burned before her eyes, who has failed his own people, you have the gall to judge me. Please die. Mordred then proceeded with her furious attack, slamming blow after blow into the emotionless king's invisible blade. Naruto was working hard. As Berserker deflected another of his blows, he muttered, fuck, if this keeps up. It was obvious that Berserker was probably more adept at close quarters than Saber himself. Naruto was simply outclassed, even though he wasn't a slouch up close. Even if he really tried, he could have kept up with Saber and even defeated her, but not against a monster like Berserker, who was striking with incredible speed and force. He was failing even then, and it was all he could do to keep up. Suddenly, it didn't seem like a good idea to take on Berserker, especially since the primary goal was to see how strong the insane servant could get. Suddenly, it seemed to the blonde magus that he had taken on a bit more than he could handle. Of course, that was when the playing field was even. Furthermore, Naruto Uzumaki was unfair. He rolled under another blow that almost knocked his head off, and grunted. He jumped back, pulled out another scroll, put a hand on another symbol, and unsealed it, saying, time to kick it up a notch. Paper? In the shadows, Kenneth snorted. Paper? What can he hope to do with something as useless as that? However, all were shocked when the spiky-haired magus made a strange sign with his hands, and, without the enormous sword, a clone of him appeared, grabbed the paper sheets, and quickly disappeared. What the fuck? Mumbled Waver. The rider arched an eyebrow. Oh, that's interesting. The blonde magus was serious because he would probably die if he treated the insane servant lightly. He was utterly serious. No jokes or words were exchanged. Then he started to move, blurring away at speeds that were faster than he had previously been moving and faster than a normal human could see. He would have to strain his bones and tear his muscles to keep up with an opponent with such skill. Steel repeatedly clashed with steel, creating a discordant sound, while Berserker's improvised weapon was pierced by Naruto's enormous blade. Repeatedly. Nevertheless, it was evident that Naruto was gradually deteriorating despite this extra work. Blades crashing into each other, the blonde trying his hardest to block as many of Berserker's blows as he could because it would be suicidal to stand in direct opposition to that level of power. Despite Naruto's strength, it was evident that Berserker was anything but a typical heroic spirit. In an effort to lessen and dispel the force behind the mad servant's swings and stabs, Naruto continued to deflect blows. He was also largely successful, but he continued to be pushed back. Strangely enough, Ryder saw that the clone had vanished entirely. It then briefly reappeared before dissipating in a tiny puff of smoke. The blonde remained stoic, though his lips twitched upwards in a small smile momentarily. Then, in order to prevent a blow to the heart, he stepped back. Another was a huge leap backwards to prevent disembowelment and avoid being dismembered. Naruto was slowly but surely regressing, even though he had stayed up with Berserker longer than most men and many servants could ever hope to. Berserker was moving steadily forward, raining blow after blow on the blonde in the suit, its darkened helmet erupting in crazed howls. The blonde magus appeared to be on the verge of passing out for a brief moment. Naruto stumbled onto some litter that was strewn all over the floor, his feet slipping a little. This caused him to grunt as the lamppost lacerated his left arm in his distraction. A minor wound that wasn't life-threatening but was nonetheless bothersome, and a sign that the fight would quickly deteriorate if he didn't take action to render Berserker unconscious or dead right away. Then he grinned as his muscles strained to withstand Berserker's incredible strength as he took one last blow from the sword's blade. Leaping backward, he deflected the lamppost and dropped one hand from his blade's handle to create a half-hand seal, curling the other fingers and raising the index and middle fingers. Instantly, a concussive force swept across the battlefield. A huge plume of smoke rose from the new ball of fire that had appeared beneath the Black Knight, and the ground beneath Berserker erupted in gouts of fire. There was no property nearby that could have been harmed by the explosion, and it occurred on the far side of the docks, where no one had been watching. It was a deafening blast. Panting from his recent exertions, Naruto leaned heavily on the ground and jammed his blade into it. Lancer began, startled. What did he just do? Ryder grinned, obviously thrilled that the well-dressed magus had changed the course of the conflict. Did you not see? He formed a clone, and had to take paper to some unknown location. We have not been watching that corner of the battlefield. That paper obviously can be detonated with a hand sign. And there was trash on the ground, including paper. He used the clone to set the explosives and lured Berserker into a trap. Clever, oh so clever. Lancer scowled. That is not chivalrous, not at all. I will admit though, it is quite intelligent of him. Avenger paused as her blade deadlocked with Saber's once more, and stared at the blossoming plume of smoke. It seems that your master is quite competent indeed, if he is able to hold off something like Berserker. Saber grinned. Of course. After all, he is the only one in this era that I would trust my back to. He is the most exceptional master among all of the masters. Avenger trailed off. Interesting, to think that such a caliber of being exists in this era, and to gain the king's favor. When I could not. You would give some nameless dog the honor of fighting by your side, when you. The Avenger howled with utter wrath. Again I have been shunned. Retreat, Avenger. You are wounded quite severely, and I outmatch you. It would be unseemly of me to dispose of a wounded opponent like this, even if you are. The Red Knight growled. You forget who it was that killed you. Arthur. The angry servant of vengeance was surrounded by a crimson aura that was as red as recently spilled blood. The magi present could feel her prana levels flickering, quickly rising, soaring. This could only mean one thing. Avenger's noble phantasm was about to be released. Her helmet's two halves split, lowering themselves into her armor to reveal a face that was exactly like Saber's. In other words, the face of a very attractive young lady. Ryder hummed thoughtfully. So, it's true. That's Mordred, and the other is Arthur Pendragon, the King of Knights. How fortunate I am to face such opponents. Mordred's expression was one of complete rage and fury, anger directed at her father, the person who embodied all of her desires in life. She raised her sword with both hands, disregarding the wound on one, and launched her last attack in a last-ditch effort to murder her most despised foe. Lancer, however, stepped forward and positioned himself between the two lookalikes, halting even this attempt. Avenger. Saber, this goes far enough. Saber, I wouldn't want you to sabotage my opportunity to face Avenger. To give me the opportunity to engage in a one-on-one duel with the Servant of Vengeance, I would like you to stand down. Imbecile, the Bloody Knight growled angrily. Move, lest you want to become oblivious like my father. This is a personal matter, Lancer, said Saber, acknowledging this desire but shaking her head. Sorry, but I have to fight Avenger for my own honor. I see. When they heard an inhuman roar reverberate across the harbor and water, the entire conversation came to a halt, and everyone turned to see where Naruto and Berserker had engaged in combat. Naruto realized he was screwed when the roar was released. Although he was aware that Berserker had not been killed by the explosion, he had sincerely hoped that the explosive tags would be sufficient to render Berserker unconscious for a minimum of several minutes. Apparently, this was not to be. Naruto moaned, "Of all the times to leave my high-quality supplies at home," and muttered, "I need better ink." Hiraishin was his trump card, his ultimate weapon in a sense, and he had no intention of letting anyone understand how it works so they could come up with a suitable counter by allowing them to study it. A glimpse or two was already pushing it. No, he wouldn't use Hiraishin, but he really didn't want to use it, since he had already used it several times that night. The only problem was actually standing up to Berserker long enough to implement said options. "Have I got? Indeed. Level 3 tags," he muttered to himself. Naruto made his own seals and explosive tags, categorizing everything in accordance with his own small system. He used 10 level 5 tags, which are capable of totally destroying a regular man, to blow up Berserker. Level 3 was intended to destroy heavily armored targets, such as tanks or small aircraft, which, if sufficiently numerous, could potentially destroy an entire city block. 6 of the Doomsday Papers were in Naruto's left hand, behind his back. However, it turned out that Berserker was charging at the other combatant pair, specifically Mordred, rather than the blonde. "Ragggrh," he howled, obviously furious at her presence, but Lancer's red spear neatly sliced his homemade weapon in half. "That's sufficient, Berserker." Clearly annoyed by Berserker's abrupt interruption, Lancer said, "Do not continue further, as I will not tolerate your transgressions. I will not have you interfering in this honorable duel as well." "Lancer, what are you doing? Take out Avenger, or even better, Saber." There was a faint hint of irritation in Lancer's master's voice as it drifted through the atmosphere. "I'm going to kill Avenger. On my honor, I, Dearmudo Dinah, swear. But first, watch as I tend to this rabid dog. Lord, please. By my command seal, I order you, my lord." Naruto's eyebrow went up in surprise when he heard, to assist Avenger and kill Saber. He had thought Kaneth would target the injured servant instead. "My lord? If her master can engage Berserker in hand combat, and if Saber is actually King Arthur, she poses the greatest threat in this situation. That servant won't be around for long because Berserker appears to be pursuing Avenger. Assassinate Saber. Better yet, murder her boss. So I give the order." With a sigh, Naruto said, "Well, fuck. I apologize, Saber," Lancer said, shaking his head in exasperation as he lunged at her with his golden spear, which Saber quickly deflected with her invisible blade. "I would have rather fought under better circumstances against someone like you. I bear no ill feelings towards you, Lancer, merely to your idiotic fop of a master." He lunged forward, only to be flung backwards after blocking a swing from Berserker, who apparently managed to grab hold of Kabikirabocho, pulling it from the ground and swinging it with one hand. "Be as it may be though, I really cannot have you insult my new avowed lord." The sight of the Black Knight brandishing a huge sword was enough to make anyone shudder. Avenger was slashed and cut, and he immediately stumbled back. "A woman. We're heading out. I can no longer resist Berserker, especially if my father is also opposing me," she said coolly. "Certainly." Irisfiel stumbled, then turned and walked away as the Red Knight transformed into a spirit and Avenger faded away into red particles. "Papa, I'm excited for our next encounter. Pitting myself against your master will be interesting. I wonder, will he bleed as he fights?" she said with a savage smile. "You will not touch my master," Saber said, twitching in rage. "I won't let you near my master, and you won't gaze at him with those eyes." She practically screamed, showing more emotion than she had during her battle with Avenger. Avenger just grinned and disappeared. The other servant took a deep breath, then looked up to see that Berserker was still there, still wielding Kabikirabocho, and that he was, or seemed to be, staring right at her. She would have cursed the root if she had been a magus. Saber braced herself for the impact, but it never came as the Black Knight roared and charged straight at the small blonde, lifting that enormous blade over his head to deliver a deadly blow. Naruto smirked and made the same hand seal as before, and 6 pieces of paper with different writings and seals on them started to sizzle on the side of the beheading blade. Larger and louder than the last one, Kabikirabocho rose in a cloud of smoke, fire, and a deafening explosion that threw Berserker to the ground instantly, and pieces of shrapnel from the broken sword started to rain down the ground, with various metallic chunks visible burrowed in his slightly dented armor. Berserker was obviously not happy about that outcome, and although the damage was superficial, it certainly made a point to have a sword explode in one's face. Given your problematic ability, Did you really think I would just leave one of my weapons lying around? I don't think so, sneered Naruto. Oi, master of Berserker. You should probably put your rabid dog on hold if you can hear me. A bewildered blonde magus, an irritated maiden wielding a sword, a dumbfounded lancer, an excited rider, and a prickly and sniveling child were left behind after Berserker gave one last roar of protest before transforming into spirit form. Naruto sighed and picked up the handle of his blade, which still had a sizable portion of the blade attached, while the remainder of the sword was in tiny pieces. Oh no, I have to fix this now, he muttered, I detest doing that. Lancer, do you really believe you can fight two opponents at once? Silently, Saber said, because if you do, then. That's sufficient, Lancer. Retreat. Yes, my lord. The servant with the lance turned to go, saying, my meeting you, young master, king of knights, has been an honor. I'm excited for a duel with you. With a simple nod of her head, Saber said, and I would be happy to oblige with that request. Lancer then departed, leaving 4 figures on the docks. Oh my. How intriguing. Ryder laughed. Naruto, you are undoubtedly a very strong man, aren't you? Saber asked the tall man who was holding his chin in contemplation, what exactly was your intent when you first arrived, King of Conquerors? Naruto chuckled as Ryder said, no idea. I don't really think about these things. Ryder is such an honest man that he made him wonder what life would be like in his kingdom. Ryder turned and seized his reins, saying, Saber. First, settle with Avenger. Then, I will face the victor, whether it be Avenger or you. Goodbye for now, King of Knights. He looked down at Waver and said, and goodbye to you Naruto. I hope that our next meeting is as enjoyable as this one was. Hey boy, don't you have anything nice to say? It was evident from pulling him up by his collar that the shock of the huge explosion had rendered him unconscious. As Ryder snapped his reins, Naruto smiled and Saber smiled slightly, saying, man, I wish he'd man up a little. He took off into the sky, saying, farewell, as though the sky were the actual road. The only people remaining on the former battlefield were Naruto and Saber. With a sigh of exhaustion, the blonde in the suit fell to the ground. Naruto. Saber rushed to her master and knelt down in front of him, gazing into azure eyes with concern. Are you injured? Tired? Despite its extreme fatigue, the spiky blonde smiled. Wincing from the tiny jolt of pain that shook his whole body, he stood back up and said, I'm fine, Saber. Just a little tired. Berserker was frightfully strong. I'm certain that I could have not stood against him for much longer, not without using Hiraishin or some of my more destructive seals. He exhaled. I had to resort to baiting him into a trap, and even then he shrugged off level 3 like it was nothing. Saber sighed and shook her head slightly. At least, you're all right. He didn't inflict any lasting injuries on you, did he? Naruto gave a headshake. He lifted his arm to show a rapidly disappearing laceration visible through a tear in his sleeve. The worst that I got was a cut on my arm, and that's healing up right now. I'm just tired, is all. Before speaking again, Saber remained motionless for a while, her bangs casting shadows over her eyes. She muttered, you idiot. Pushing yourself to the limit like that, before letting out another sigh and rushing to Naruto's aid when it became clear he would pass out again. You idiot. After muttering a string of unintelligible words, the blonde resumed her clear speech. I'm a terrible man, Saber, to make you worry like this. I'm sorry for making you worry. The other blonde shook her head in discontent. Don't apologize. You might be an idiot, but at the very least. Naruto whispered, I'm your master, nah. Yes. You are. The magus and servant started to leave, with the shorter figure supporting the taller one. Let's just go home, Saber. Yes, Naruto. They then departed. The front door of the Uzumaki residence opened, and 2 figures shivered through the threshold. The taller figure shut the door, walked over to a nearby futon and immediately collapsed in the futon. With a sigh, the smaller one sat by the futon and gazed at the taller one's features. Saber was. Are you upset? Observing her master in this condition, when he was typically robust, healthy, and vivacious. It disturbed her. She could safely say that her master was one of the strongest people that she had ever known, unwavering in his ideals and conviction. It was no small matter to fight a servant, particularly one as strong as Berserker. And yet, she was sure that Naruto could defeat Berserker and trusted him to fight him. She could trust him to stay alive, for after more than 3 weeks of getting to know him, fighting with him, and dining with him, she was confident that the blonde with spiky hair would be able to. Even if his destruction was certain, Naruto was the kind of person who would never give up and would keep fighting. He would continue fighting on, and he would most likely attempt to rip his opponent's throat out with his own teeth in his dying moments. With a faint smile on her face, Saber whispered, "Brave fool," while staring at Naruto's sleeping face. She couldn't help but respect his perseverance and determination, though. A person like that, she was compelled to admire him. The servant knelt beside her master's head and touched his forehead with an unexpectedly soft touch. "Sleep well, Naruto. You fought bravely today." As the sword's servant kept watch over Naruto's sleeping form, the hand lowered. A crystal ball shone in another place, showing pictures of two knights, one red and one blue. It was a dank space, dark that surpassed normal black. The eerie sounds of those tormented souls drifting through the palpable darkness were the faint screaming and moaning of the damned. The only source of illumination was that crystal ball, about the size of a ball of yarn. "Awesome, awesome, awesome," exclaimed a young man with red hair, obviously thrilled by the recent events. "That was so cool. Did you see that guy blow up the other guy? And that massive sword, so cool." The other figure, clearly trembling, was crouched over the crystal ball. "Sir, it has come true. My dream has become realized. What I have been striving for has been realized." The holy maiden, exuberant tears were streaming down a pale and gaunt face. What? She who was once abandoned by God, annihilated in disgrace, but now, she has been resurrected. It's a miracle. It was because of my faithful wishes. Those allowed her to be reborn. Although Ryunosuke was unaware of what was happening, he could relate to Bluebeard, the man he admired, and his present joy. Additionally, despite their brief relationship, Bluebeard consistently comes up with brilliant ideas, even in the midst of extreme distress. The odd man Ryunosuke worshipped was a sadistic artist, a murderer, and a new threat to the world. For Ryunosuke, Bluebeard's happiness meant that whatever had happened to him must have been a good thing, and it was definitely worth waiting for. "For some strange reason, I'm beginning to get excited as well, Sir Bluebeard." An evil sneer twisted the other's face. "There is a fake though. A copy, not fit to wear the visage of that holy maiden. Such impudence. It must be punished." Castor cried and sobbed at the same time, shaking his hair loose. His frenzied eyes were fixed on the young woman's face, the noble knight in blue with the invisible blade, and he clasped the crystal tightly with both hands while pressing his forehead against its icy surface. "Oh, maiden, my holy chaste virgin, I will be with you soon. No matter what, please wait for me." As the two of them crossed a verdant field with only grass and bushes, the blond man abruptly asked, "Saber, what is war?" "I don't comprehend the question, master. People don't kill people, monsters kill people. War is a monster. Greed is a monster. Does that mean that I'm a monster too?" "Ah, but heroes kill monsters. Monsters kill men, men kill heroes." "Enough, master. You are not a monster. No matter what you believe. I do not believe it, no, I cannot accept that. Have you not saved those villages? Are you not fighting to protect?" Naruto just gazed at the overcast sky and grinned wistfully. "Ah, but didn't you know? Monsters kill men. Do the ends justify the means then? I digress. To be perfectly honest, bloodshed is still bloodshed, no matter how you try to justify it." As they watched the stormy sky with thunder rumbling, lightning flashing, and a soft patter of rain falling from the heavens, the two asked themselves, "Is that true then?" It seemed as though a great god was crying. "Saber, who am I? Am I a monster, a man, a magus? Who am I? Your name is Naruto Uzumaki, and you are my master, as I am your blade, you are my wielder." Kuritsugu scowled and smoked a cigarette idly while thinking about his current situation. Among his many issues were a few that were particularly urgent and would undoubtedly totally sabotage his plans. First of all, someone stole his original catalyst. Of all people, by Zelretch. Zelretch. The elderly vampire apologized for the inconvenience and other things in a fucking note. He added a little drawing of a chibi. Zelretch providing a peace symbol to finish the picture. Oct, the old man, was furious. Finding Avalon had taken a significant amount of time and effort, and then the greatest troll in Nasuver's history had to go and take it. The Einsburns were fortunate to have a backup. To Kuritsugu's dismay, he was granted the servant class Avenger, which meant that his servant Mordred would not be eligible for any class benefits. Although Kuritsugu was annoyed by this development, he wasn't bothered by it. No, Kuritsugu's current concerns were about what had happened at the docks just now. Specifically, one particular magical blonde. Uzumaki Naruto. The Magus killer was aware of Naruto and his many adventures. Naruto, like him, hunted sealing designates, dead apostles, and similar creatures to earn a living. He had a reputation for never failing a mission, for completing all of them successfully, and for creating his own unique style of magic. But unlike Kuritsugu Emiya, the blonde only ever accepted missions that involved saving the innocent, or killing threats to humanity, never accepting any that were morally dubious or wholly at odds with his own brand of justice. Kuritsugu scoffed at his behavior as a result, writing Naruto off for his lack of maturity. Kuritsugu was unaware that Naruto was all too familiar with death. Furthermore, Kuritsugu was unaware that the blonde magus was anything but innocent and naive. He is actually the complete opposite of innocent. Before returning to sleep, the blonde rolled around on his futon and muttered something about how someone was talking about him. Now, Kuritsugu Emiya was worried because, in addition to the fact that this war had an unknown element, he detested unknowns. That element was also incredibly potent in and of itself. Before Berserker cut him off and forced him to change his focus, the Magus Killer had a clear line of sight on Lancer's master. Consequently, he was able to observe the entire conflict between the master and servant. The sight was depressing. The unpredictable blonde could compete with Berserker in addition to summoning King Arthur as Saber. And triumphing. In addition, Naruto didn't play fair by tricking Berserker into falling into a hurriedly set trap and then again soon after. Instead of fighting like a knight or a magus, the blonde fought like a soldier. The fact that Kuritsugu had to contend with an unexpected foe in the conflict, one who was so strong and had a mindset so dissimilar from that of a magus, was what most alarmed him. Certainly, it was not a good thing. In addition, the blonde was a trickster. Apprenticed to the second magic user Zelretch. Together, these facts indicated that Kuritsugu's danger rating for Naruto Uzumaki had just surpassed 11. The Magus Killer then started making plans and preparing backups to deal with this new factor. For the sake of his dream and his wish, he would stop at nothing to fulfill that dream. Safe inside the walls of Einsborn Castle, the Magus Killer kept thinking about this. Even as his wife watched, worried about his welfare, and even as Avenger, wearing what may have been one of the skimpiest outfits Kuritsugu had ever had the misfortune of seeing, scoffed a little and carried on exploring said castle, he continued to plot and scheme. He finally reached a decision. If our plans are to be successful, Uzumaki must be eliminated first. Everyone else. It makes no difference. Tonight, Saber's master must perish. He would stop at nothing to make sure his wish came true. After all, that was who he was. To address this new variable, his initial plan would need to be modified, but that was okay. Maya, Irisfield. Get ready, we're moving out tonight. In the Uzumaki home, a blonde with spiky hair was just waking up. He squinted his eyes, trying to protect them from those blazing rays, and muttered, fucking sun. He sat up and rubbed his sore back, saying loudly, I swear, I will destroy you, you fiend. The stresses of the night before had been somewhat alleviated by a single night's sleep, but it seemed that his aching muscles would require a little more time to heal completely. When Naruto saw a kneeling figure sleeping close to his futon, watching over him, he sighed. It turned out that Saber had stayed up all night silently watching him, rather than going to sleep. It appeared that she had essentially remained by his side until the point of exhaustion set in. Naruto whispered, honestly, she didn't need to worry so much, after saying, I can take care of myself, you know. The blonde magus felt a little bad about causing his servant to worry. I'll have to make it up to her, somehow, he murmured. For now though, I better make breakfast. The aroma of cooking food woke Saber. She stretched and yawned in a way that most people would associate with a sluggish cat sunbathing, then blinked in perplexity. She wasn't with her master. She wasn't even in the same place, actually. She lay on a futon. Her master's futon, to be exact. It was warm and comfortable, the blonde servant remarked absently before bringing herself back to the present. Naruto, are you cooking breakfast? Yup, I am. Just stay there, I'll be back shortly. The blonde with green eyes sighed as she unwinded in the warm, inviting sunlight and tried her hardest to shake the slight panic that had taken hold of her. Shortly after, Naruto came in carrying a tray of food. Bacon, toast, fried eggs, and an orange juice glass make up a typical, Western, breakfast. Breakfast in bed, Saber. Enjoy? Saber blinked in complete bewilderment, saying, thank you, Naruto. But, you didn't need to go this far. Saber, what did I say about? She squeaked, my apologies, I was just surprised, that's all. Naruto placed the food tray on the floor. You shouldn't have stayed up all night, you know, it's bad for your health. As a servant I can handle more challenging environmental conditions than a normal human. You know that, Naruto. The blonde sighed, but even so, it couldn't have been comfortable. He paused in thought and said, there was no need to save. Guard me all night, it was unnecessary. Didn't we have a talk about this before? Saber's expression dimmed. His genuine smile made Saber's cheeks warm a little as she turned her head away, obviously embarrassed by her body's uncontrollable reaction. "Ah. I appreciate the gesture though. Thank you for doing so." "You're welcome." Naruto gave his servant a victorious smile before pointing to the food tray. "Well, aren't you going to eat?" "Thank you." Naruto. Ma, don't thank me yet. You spent the whole night up, which means that you are going to lie in bed and eat, then actually get some sleep. I don't. Are we clear, Saber? Yes. As a result, Saber grudgingly consented to Naruto spoiling her for a brief while. I'm getting off topic, but she wasn't as hesitant as she would have been 3 weeks ago. In any case, the sword servant gave herself permission to unwind for a little while in an attempt to relieve the strain on her muscles. She concluded that it was pleasant to have someone nearby who would attend to all of your needs. More significantly, it was pleasant to have a friend nearby with whom she could converse. As the sun gradually rose, servant and master started their day in this manner. It was a day full of promises. While the blonde was idly drawing a ceiling matrix for one of his Hiraishin kunai, Saber sat at the same table and sipped the orange juice, asking curiously, "What is our plan of action today, Naruto?" A clone was refurbishing losses and making more explosive tags. When it came to his supplies, Naruto was a little OCD. A tiny bit. Naruto sighed. Plan of action. Well, we could check out Waver Velvet's place of residence. That was the one place we didn't go to last night. Saber frowned with mild irritation. Very well, though. Is something wrong, Saber? That writer character, he seems like. Naruto let out a sigh. Oi, Saber. You can't just say that you dislike him, you know. Alexander seems to be a man of brutal honesty and great courage. The Saber dead. Panned, he is a moron. What kind of servant blatantly announces their identity like that? Granted, I inadvertently did so as well, but that was. The atmosphere instantly became solemn and muted. Naruto whispered, Mordred. Mordred is going to be the biggest threat. I concur, Naruto. If it is Mordred, then. The blonde magus yanked at his hair in exasperation, saying, this war has become exponentially more difficult. Goddamn it all. First we have the fucking king of heroes summoned as archer by one of the strongest magi in the war. Then we have that crazy berserker that could take 2 level 3 to the face and live, and now we have Mordred. Mordred of all people, why did their backup have to be Mordred? Naruto took a moment to breathe before continuing his argument. At least, Mordred isn't at 100%. If she was, this would be even harder than it already is. There was more silence, then Saber's voice. Is that your plan of action then? No, it isn't. Not anymore. A good thing that came about from last night is that we learned the abilities and identities of most of the servants in the war, and their respective masters. Ryder and Velvet aren't that much of a threat, however, Emiya and Mordred. They have to be taken out first. With a sigh, he ran a hand through his golden hair, briefly straightening it before it spiked up again, and he started talking again. The problem is that they're situated in a castle of all things, making a frontal assault idiotic. No. Saber. Would you hate me if I told you that? The servant let out a sigh. You are going to do something that is the exact opposite of chivalry again, aren't you? Mordred is a serious threat, even when she is not allowed to use one arm, and Emiya is a cunning opponent, an even more potent threat. We're going to ambush them then, when they come out of the castle. Saber's eyes blinked. Why would they come out of the castle? Because, in order to heal Avenger's arm, they're going to target Lancer and Lancer's master, in order to treat Avenger's healable wound by ensuring that the cause of said wound is slain, meaning that they'll have to leave the castle at some point, and at that time is when we'll strike. I have no objections, Naruto. It is necessary. Avenger is a threat that must be eliminated. I do have one request, Naruto. I wish to fight Avenger in a duel, face my inner demons honorably. Will you allow me this? With a sigh, Naruto picked up a cup of tea. Will you win? You know me, Naruto. A wry smile twitched upward on the blonde's lips. In that case, do whatever you wish. Just win, that is the one thing that I ask of you. Of course. Have you no faith in me? You know me, Saber. What do you think? At the same time, Kirei Kotomine and Tokiomi Tasaka were planning their own projects. The conspirators were now in Tokiomi's estate, with the red-suited man lounging in a cozy chair and his companion shuffling anxiously in a corner. The cold silence was broken by Tokiomi's words, that's Saber. That will be trouble. Her and her master. To think that someone could summon the legendary King of Knights, as Saber. and then proceed to fight a servant head-to-head and not lose outright, and succeed in pushing it back. Last night, Kirei had spied on the masters and servants using his assassin. Instead, it was an expression of a cloned part of assassin. The other masters thought assassin had been vanquished because Gilgamesh had only killed a clone on the first night, but in reality, there was nothing wrong with the servant. The elegant man in the red suit muttered under his breath, "He shall have to be eliminated then, if he is a magician on top of that, and to match Berserker in physical combat. Even if Berserker would have overpowered him, he and his servant, they shall have to go first." The curt reply from Kirei Kotomine was, "Very well then. Assassin shall dispatch him then, as soon as we find his base of operations." Good. Even a man such as he cannot hope to survive an assault from the servant of silent murder. Even if he can face Berserker head-to-head, he can still fall to the knife in his back. Sadly, it wouldn't be that simple. True, Assassin was an assassin, but Naruto was an assassin by trade. If anything, he was an assassin of assassins. Thus, Tokiomi and Kirei were about to discover that killing him would not be that easy. You must have sympathy for him, I mean, assassin. Excited, or curious, was how Kirei Kotomine felt. He was wondering not only why Kuritsugu Emiya existed, but also, why in the world are you so powerful, Uzumaki Naruto? Why did you want to be strong? What is your life's purpose? In one way or another, this warped man would get his answers. In one way or another, he had become interested in another in this war. Once more, Naruto and Saber were on patrol. For the pair, this had become a tradition, if you will. It was a habit, and habits were bad in the profession of assassination. This one wasn't, though, because the blonde's departure time from their home varied daily, as did the route they took. In Fuyuki City, it was midday on yet another serene day. The people were totally oblivious to the devastation that had taken place the night before, and they had no idea that a war was going on beneath this serene exterior. 8 masters were tearing at each other's throats, but they were unaware of it. In order to hide the nature of the Holy Grail War and maintain the secrecy of magecraft, the church had successfully covered up the damage at the docks by fabricating stories and lies. It was merely another day. As he leaned against a wall and crossed his arms, enjoying the little sunlight that fell on his body and basking in its warmth, Naruto let out a small sigh of contentment and bliss. It was difficult to believe that he had been involved in a supernatural conflict only the night before. It's hard to believe he had been on the verge of death the night before. He was almost too easily killed by Berserker. Given that Naruto was one of the greatest fighters of his time, the fact that the maddening servant was quicker, stronger, and more skilled than he was said to speak volumes about the Black Knight's skill. The planet would have lost one spiky-haired blonde if the battle had gone on as it had. Naruto was fortunate that he didn't fight fairly. That spiky blonde-haired blue-eyed bastard, Shikamaru Nara famously remarked, in battle, then he's a real ninja, he is not a fair fighter. As it turned out, Naruto was actually restraining Berserker to a considerable extent, but he also felt that the Black Knight was restraining most of his, definitely a guy, with that power. Berserker would be an absurdly difficult foe, but when contrasted with that king of heroes, Archer is an even more potent known variable than Berserker, who is a potent unknown. Additionally, Avenger is basically King Arthur's opposite, and it just so happens that King Arthur is my servant. Avenger has to go first. For this reason, Naruto and his smaller servant were on patrol to keep an eye on enemy movements. But he could have accomplished this by using shadow clones. I was put into a coma far too frequently by the memory's backlash. Thus, we find our protagonist in his current predicament, lounging in the sun like a house cat that has grown out of control. He looked to his right, where Saber stood with his long lashes lowered over his dazzling emerald eyes. Dust particles appeared to float in the dazzling rays of that ball of incandescent gas, while light played along her small frame, her half-smile, and her closed eyes. Before the fingers jerked away, Naruto felt them brush against his own tanned hand. He let out a sigh. Saber was a special woman, the blonde magus thought quietly. He glanced back at her face, at her almost depressing smile. Unfortunately, despite his desire to enjoy the sense of camaraderie once more, they had business to attend to. The blonde scowled and said, "Saber, do you see that?" Saber stiffened, slowly looking in the direction her master was looking, catching a glimpse of a lonely alleyway where a slouched figure was just barely visible. "Yes, but I fail to see how this could be relevant to the war, Naruto." The blonde stood up, brushed dust from his suit, and started to head toward the alley. "Oh, but it is all too relevant, Saber. All too relevant." After blinking in bewilderment, Saber followed Naruto. She would have faith in him because she had previously trusted him and the spiky Haired Magus had not let her down. Now why should she not trust him? And wasn't that the main point of the situation? She had faith in him. A hunched over man with white hair, a deformed face, and a raggedy hoodie and jeans, breathing heavily. He was obviously in excruciating, incapacitating pain. When Naruto saw the fallen figure, he shook his head. Really, the things that you have done to yourself, was that really necessary, Kariamato? With a weary head, the man sprawled on the ground glared at the well, dressed blonde with disdain and rage. You know nothing of my life, or why this was necessary. Is there a point? Why are you here, Naruto Uzumaki, master of saber? Naruto gave a shrug. He sighed and knelt beside Kariya, who grunted in pain once more, saying, I myself do not know. You are obviously suffering. Dear God, what have you done? Does it matter? Why would you care? Naruto became aware of his servant's presence when he heard a faint patter of footsteps behind both masters. Is it wrong to care about your fellow man? Kariya muttered bitterly, as if you could know what it is to care about someone. Although he stopped Saber from expressing her annoyance at the Madu master, the blonde-haired man remained silent. I see. Who is it that you're battling for? WH. What, it is, isn't it? The reason you're fighting. With confusion, Kariya muttered, what are you saying? Kariya Madu, last scion to the Madu family. Estranged for many years, you left Fuyuki City and just came back 1 year ago at your father's request. You turned your back on the heritage of a Magus. So, why would you come back? Better yet, why would you compete in a war like this? Kariya's dead eye and weary, painful orb were the focus of burning blue eyes. Why are you a master, Kariya Madu? How do you know this much? The ill-groomed man questioned, shaking with anger or fear. You know this much. Naruto sighed and ran a hand through his spiky hair, saying, if you think that I would go into a battle without any information as to my opponent's capabilities, without intelligence, then you are underestimating me from the get-go. I had gathered information on the prospective masters, you know. Heh. Heh. Ha. Kariya burst out laughing, chuckling almost uncontrollably. You know this much, and you still know nothing. With caution, Naruto whispered, what are you saying? It is obvious, isn't it? No human. Well, no sane human would disfigure himself or herself like that willingly, not without just cause. And you had given up on your family. His pupils widened. Blackmail? Hostages? I've met that old worm before, disgusting experience. He's not human, in any way, shape or form. Hey, you got it. I never wanted any of this, but I had no choice. There's a girl that I have to save. Girl? Not a wife, you're not married, and there is no indication. Illegitimate or adopted daughter then, or a sister? Kariya whispered, she's essentially a daughter to me. I have to save her from that worm. He promised to let her go, if I won the Grail. Naruto let out a sigh. You must love her very much, if you're willing to kill yourself in this manner for her sake. Kariya sighed, I have to win, and you're in my way. I'm sorry for this, but it must be done. Beer. Kariya froze when he felt the tip of a knife, held by the blonde man who had just been acting casual, dig into his throat. Naruto hissed in icy rage, complete that sentence and we'll see who is faster, my blade or your servant. This was not the slack-jawed man who idled away with the Matu's master, who was indifferent to encountering an adversary Magus. This assassin was a professional. A murderer who was unafraid to kill. The illusions and masks had all fallen. Kariya was devastated because Naruto had moved far more quickly than he could have imagined. He would be bleeding out on the ground with a cut throat before the Servant of Madness could stop the blonde's movement, even if he could call forth Berserker. However, he would defend himself, because if he didn't, Sakura would suffer. Sakura needed to be saved, he needed to save Sakura, he needed to. As a result, Kariya was startled when the knife left his throat and was quickly put back in its sheath in an unidentified place. Naruto pondered, looking almost. Man, you're serious about it, aren't you? You really love her. Wishful? With Saber watching stoically, the blonde man started to leave, saying, well, who am I to deprive a man of the desire to save his loved ones? Wait. You're just going to leave me alone? You know, I could stab you in the back, right? With a sigh, Naruto turned around. You know, once, I was in a position like the one that you're in right now. He said softly. The blue-eyed man turned and walked away, saying, I'm not going to go into details, but it ended on an extremely sour note for all of the parties involved. Seeing that same situation unfold right now, it makes me a little sad. Besides, you seem like a fairly decent guy. It's a shame you were born into a shitty family, but what can you do? I can still stab you in the back. If you think you can live with the repercussions, go on. Just know, I promised someone that I would live on. I will not die quietly. Even though he could sick berserker on Naruto, the blonde master had actually held his life in his hands and released him, so Kariya fell silent at this point. In the past, though, he would have simply killed the man to get Sakura free. When he claimed to be aware of my circumstances, he wasn't lying. Additionally, the dying man gritted his teeth and said, "Wait. I know that this is rather sudden, but can you help me with a matter?" His brain and nervous system were being eaten away by the burning crestworms that had been implanted in his body. The pain was unbearably intense. "Oh, and what is this that you would like assistance with? You seem like a good person, and you know of my family." "Of your family, not about your family. What of it?" Kariya trailed off. "Well, you're still better than that piece of shit that's my father. Anyway, that old vampire. Do you know, he's lived well over 500 years now." "Yes." Naruto blinked, perplexed. "What of it? I admit that is an unusually long time, but why begin there? Do you know how he stays alive? He has familiars, worms, bloodworms." The blonde magus trembled with disgust. Those things? They freaked the crap out of me when I first knew about them, from my earlier learnings in magecraft. Fucking Zelretch and his trolling. He's composed of them. To be more exact, his body is composed of his familiars, a conglomerate of worms with a special appetite for human flesh and blood that combine themselves to take a human form. Naruto's eyes grew wide. "Oh god. He implanted those things in you in order to simulate magical circuits, didn't he? Guess who else he did it to?" The blonde stepped back, his face utterly horrified and shocked, then calmed down, a kind of peaceful fury settling into his mind. "How old is she?" 5 years old. One Zokenmatu might find himself facing double barrels of blue death at this declaration if appearances could kill. And if words could spew poison. "I see. He implanted those things inside of a little girl. How? Distasteful." "No, this was ice. Ice that had been frozen to a temperature of 0 degrees Celsius, cold enough to put out Amaterasu's black flames. Tonight, someone was going to die. As much as the very concept sickens me, what are you telling me this for? I want to make a deal with you. You seem to be a decent guy. You have no proof of this. I am an enemy, you do realize. Your enemy in this Holy Grail war. Why would you ask me for assistance?" Kariya chuckled once more. "You're admitting it. That immediately makes you more trustworthy than most of the other magi in this stupid war. I don't even care about a cup, I just want to save Sakura. Hey, I'm so pathetic I need to go to a total stranger for help. That's so low of me, but please, I beg you. Just save her, please." With a sigh, Naruto squeezed the bridge of his nose and closed his eyes. "Are you going to trust me then? Trust a complete stranger, a person who was your servant's combatant just last night? You shouldn't trust a potential enemy. Where else can I go? Who else can I go to? It is stupid, foolish, but I still beg you, please save Sakura, please." Reaching down to the man who was on the verge of tears, Naruto put a hand on his shoulders. "I'd call you an idiot for placing your trust in a person you have no right to place trust in, regardless though. I'll save her. This I swear, Kariya. You have my word, and I never break a promise. So long as you rescue her from my bastard of an uncle. Desperate men do desperate things in times of need, huh? I like you, Kariya. If you are willing to go this far to save one girl. Most people wouldn't have that kind of mental fortitude, or willpower. Quite commendable. Will you do it then? Will you save her? I said I would, didn't I?" With a frown on his face and his hands in his pockets, Naruto left the alley. This incident had dampened his mood considerably. Saber trailed him a little. With a tone of disapproval, Saber said, "Naruto, are you going to help him then? He is an enemy master, you do realize." When there was no response, the man with the blonde hair went on, "Saber. Those eyes. They weren't the eyes of a frightened man, of an angered man, of a calculating man. Tell me, where else did you see those eyes? Those eyes that are filled with nothing but determination and the will to move on. He reminds you of you, doesn't he? A man who sacrificed everything for the sake of his loved ones. Yes, that man, that Kariya has no regrets, doesn't he? Why are you helping him? You and your hero complex. This man could be lying to you, you do realize. Because no child deserves to go through the hell that Kariya told me that Sakura was going through. Because Kariya seems to be a good man, even if he did order that black thing to attack us, because, by saving this, Sakura, we can gain a prospective ally, earn his goodwill. And because I have been trained to discern whether or not a person is lying. He had no tells, He did not give any outward appearance of deception through his body language and manner of speaking. He wasn't lying, Saber. And even if he was, it wouldn't hurt to investigate, wouldn't it? With a sigh, Saber covered her eyes and said, I knew that you had an actual, pragmatic reason for this action. You know me well, Saber. True, very well then. I suppose we'll both be taking the role of a knight today. After all, in the stories, don't the knights try to rescue the princess? This made Saber laugh. Why, I suppose it does, after all. Naruto finished what Saber had started and started to move more quickly. Monsters kill men. Heroes kill monsters. Men kill heroes. Today, we shall be killing a monster, to be more specific, a worm, at the behest of this poor man. Let's go, Saber. We have things that must be attended to, places that must be examined, information that must be gathered. The woman with green eyes concluded, another day then. Another day. From his slouched position against a wall in that same filthy alleyway, Kariamatu wheezed, hey. Fuyuki City was full of them. Ah, did I make a mistake, entrusting Sakura's safety to that shifty dude? He asked himself after giving it some thought, then shrugged. Nope, probably not. That guy. I don't know why, but I get this feeling that I can trust him. It's just a feeling, but it's better than the ones that I have of my stupid brother and uncle. Yeah, if it's that guy. He'll save Sakura. No doubt about it. After all, anyone who can make that kind of scary expression can almost certainly deal with that old vampire. He'll save Sakura. No he can. If it's that person, he can do it. Clinging to a collapsing ladder, Kariamatu was a desperate man looking for the merest glimmer of hope in the hell that had become his life. He asked the blonde for help in this situation on the spur of the moment because of her fighting skills and personality. A desperate scheme, devised by a man who would cooperate with his adversaries to ensure Sakura Matu's safety. You better kill that monster, Naruto. There was a clack of wood against wood as Naruto quickly counterattacked after avoiding a blow to the head, only to have a wooden blade parry him. To avoid another scything blow that still ruffled his spiky golden hair, he leapt backward and threw himself to the ground. Damn, Saber. Are you trying to kill me? The smaller blonde, Saber, let out a sigh. She swung once more, saying, always so melodramatic, Master. In a battle, you should not be distracted so easily. After parrying the blow, Naruto immediately regretted it because his bruised and battered limbs were unable to match his servant's monstrous strength. He was a little taken aback by the girl's ability to strike so forcefully. Sakura Haruno, on the other hand, was equally slender and capable of punching a hole in the ground. Additionally, Akane had been. In his moment of introspection, a bamboo sword struck his head, cracking against his skull. My apologies, Master, I didn't mean to. Naruto winced and rubbed his head, pausing when a red substance glinted on his fingers. Saber. It's fine, really. I'll be alright. I'm bleeding. Huh. Well, head wounds always look worse than they actually are. At this declaration, Naruto sighed, Master, you should rest. Wearing jeans and a black t-shirt drenched in perspiration, he sat down and said, probably. Standing there in her blue skirt and white blouse, Saber sighed and lowered the sword she was holding. Are you really alright? I'm fine, Saber. You don't need to fuss over me like this. With those sharp green eyes, the blonde servant shot Naruto a deadpan stare. The last time you said that, you had a broken femur, 3 fractured ribs, a cracked skull, massive internal bleeding, torn muscles everywhere, a ruptured liver and kidneys. I get it, geez. Master, do you not care for yourself? You're killing yourself, you do realize. It is not necessary for you to fight like you are. It is already quite the accomplishment, being able to stand against me for an hour. Normal men cannot even hope to give me a defensive fight, and yet you are able to stand your ground. Naruto sighed, TCH, it's not good enough. No, I'm not good enough. If I can't manage even this much, I won't be able to stay alive. Stay alive. I have to live, in memoriam of all of my comrades who have died. I have to live, to honor their memories, and I have to live because I was ordered to live. If I can't even manage this much, then what kind of man would I be? Saber had a powerful master. His resolve was steel, and his will was iron. With each step he took, he broke the boundaries and continued to push himself to the limit. He would punch fate in the nose instead of believing in fate. She was envious of his determination to keep going. Above all, she admired and envied her master. She was happy to have a fighter for a master. Naruto was able to fight. Saber's sword came up. Shall we continue then, master? Let's, Saber. Another clash of wood on wood signaled the start of a new battle. Unfortunately, some remnants of the past could never be completely removed, even though Naruto was able to move on, and he wasn't really getting over it even then. Squinting his eyes at the piece of paper he was writing a seal on, the blonde-haired shinobi turned. Magus scowled. Right now, our main character was imprisoned in his workshop, a peaceful space within his conventional home. More precisely, it was situated within his home in a different dimension of space. Seals were amazing creatures, particularly those that dealt with space and time. With its wooden floors, dry walls, and plain ceiling, it initially appeared to be a strange and desolate space. One corner of the room had a futon, while another had a wooden desk and chair. Additionally, there was a wooden door on one side of the room that was windowless and appeared to be air tight. This was true because Naruto had enough pure oxygen stored in his seals to last him a week if he conserved it properly. The blonde didn't want to run the risk of a biological attack. Among other things, he was a little paranoid about his workshop. Aside from that, the workshop was extremely well protected. There were security seals in place that would do horrible things to any foolish intruders who were foolish enough to enter this workshop. These seals were hidden beneath the floorboards and inside the walls, which were only covered in drywall but were nevertheless made of a fairly sturdy material. Although it appeared simple, it contained multiple concealed elements that, in reality, made it possible for it to serve as a workshop. Indeed, hidden. It was his haven of havens. When Naruto had created it a year and a half before the Grail War, it had taken him 5 hours to trace the sealing matrix required to access this room, and an additional 24 hours to actually access the dimension in which his workshop was located. Here, he experimented with space, time-type magecraft, expanded his knowledge, and studied sealing techniques while creating his explosive tags. Sealing is the area of magecraft in which Naruto really excelled. It was good to see that he had a place where he could constantly create new seals to accomplish new tasks, even though sealing was essentially an adaptation of the methods already in use in the elemental nations. Although Naruto didn't particularly care for the majority of the formalities that magi were known for, he did agree with some of them. For example, the creation of a research facility. Thus, he was currently imprisoned within the aforementioned research facility. He had been working on a project for the past month that involved attempting to reduce the time required to unseal and seal objects within sealing scrolls. He was getting distracted, though, as he had gotten down to 1/4 of a second to unseal a kunai thus far. The new issue that had been presented to him was the cause of his obsession: Madou Kariya and Madou Sakura. With a sigh, Naruto pushed the sealing array he had been experimenting with aside. TCH. I can't concentrate. Kariya was telling the truth, and Naruto was positive of it. After all, he had been trained to recognize when someone was lying. Kariya revealed nothing at all in his actions, speech pattern, body language, or physical state. This indicated that he was either telling the truth or was a very good liar. However, considering the data that Naruto had gathered, the whole scenario that Berserker's master was in seemed reasonable. With a moan, the blonde magus pounded his head against his desk. Damn, this is fucked up. Knowledge was power in the blonde's experience. Furthermore, good people would be killed if they entered a potentially dangerous situation totally blind. He was lucky not to be blind. Actually, it's quite the opposite. Naruto mumbled, "Information is the key. I have all the information that I need, I just have to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Planning and deception." The blonde then reclined and assessed his circumstances. First, Kariya Madou was being coerced into fighting in this Holy Grail conflict. He wasn't willing to participate. Berserker's master. Second, Sakura Madou is the name of the hostage. Bloodworm infestation at age 5 is a terrible and excruciating form of torture. Worms have also infected Kariya. Point 3. It is undeniable that Zoken Madou is violating the sanctity of the soul by controlling the worms. Point 4. The Madou mansion was a stronghold that had been fortified for many generations by an ancient Magus family. You know, a fortress. Point 5. Unwanted attention and the hostage's death will result from mass destruction. In addition, there would be collateral damage. It is unacceptable to cause collateral damage and to involve innocent people. Point 6. The previous night's activities have already attracted unwanted attention. Openly moving would expose oneself to even more scrutiny, and most, if not all, of the masters would undoubtedly be vying for the war's most dangerous master. As he developed his strategy, Naruto thought about these 6 points for some time. Pros: I can potentially get an ally, I get to save an innocent girl from an absolutely horrendous fate, and I would get to punch that old worm's face in. Cons: possible intervention by enemy masters and servants, possible collateral damage, and more of my capabilities are going to be exposed. Decisions, decisions. Naruto deliberated for 5 minutes before making his choice. With a feeble laugh, the blonde abruptly straightened his posture and intertwined his fingers while resting his elbows on his desk. I already decided anyway, didn't I? So why am I even worrying about it? Now the question is, how to accomplish this feat? The night was peaceful, too quiet, just as it had been the night before. The sound of insects buzzing, tiny animals scuttling through the brush, gentle rustling, and movement could all be heard. There was a crunch of dirt as 2 pairs of shoes entered the empty mansion, or a mansion that appeared to be abandoned. Deserted, that is. The place had a very ominous atmosphere and appeared somewhat dilapidated and shabby. Although it was larger than the Tasaka residence, it was fairly obvious from the atmosphere that nothing lovely was happening there. Zoken Matu's home and that of the Matu family as a whole. A suitable home for a worm. What a disgusting sight. The moment Naruto, the man with the blonde hair, saw that cursed manor, he twitched. Clearly perplexed by her master's sudden bad attitude, Saber turned to face him. If his tone was any indication, he was utterly irritated and furious at the mansion. Even the most socially awkward person could see that Naruto was furious because it was so obviously dripping with rage and acid. Naruto, is there something wrong? Still furious, Naruto said, I have a bad feeling, Saber. Zoken Matu has truly crossed the line when it comes to my patience. Not so bad for Say, but I am feeling more angry than I have been this past month. The blonde servant cocked her head to the side and blinked in bewilderment. Are these bloodworms truly that bad? Naruto trembled with disgust. Worse. They're the lowest of the lowest familiars, foul and disgusting. They're excellent prana sinks, acting like artificial magic circuits, however the cost is extremely high to use them in that manner. Naruto tightened his grip. A male that has been infested by these abominations will have his spine shattered, his nervous system fried, bones broken and flesh twisted by the worms. I do not wish to speak of what happens when a female has been infested. When Saber realized the consequences, he stumbled backward. That's disgusting. Very. Naruto continued walking in the direction of the gloomy mansion. And that is why we are here. We are here to rescue a little girl that never deserved that horrifying fate. He looked at the servant. Am I understood? Saber inhaled deeply and said, Yes, Naruto. I know. This man needs to die, Naruto. He needs to die tonight. His crimes are far too great to overlook. The blonde boss flashed his sly smile. This one, however, was far more savage and bloodthirsty. I plan on it, Saber. Should we expect opposition then? Naruto let out a sigh. Knowing the nature of our opponents in this war, we can probably assume that the minute we stepped outside of the effective range of my seals, we've been spied on. Keep your guard up. After all, the knife that stabs from behind is more dangerous than the axe in the front. Saber murmured. On my honor as a knight, justice shall be served today. Another matter. Zoken Matu is one of those people who were the creators of the Holy Grail system apparently. He helped design this entire war. He is certainly not to be underestimated, and I have no doubts that he will not go down without a fight. Before Saber spoke, there was more silence as the two looked around the gloomy mansion. I wouldn't have it any other way, but how are we going to get in? We'll knock. We're civilized after all, right? Matu Byakuya was bored. Boredom, boredom, boredom. What ought he to do? The problem was that Byakuya Matu was essentially a worthless piece of shit. As a magus, he was beneath his brother. In addition to being a sniveling coward and wimp, he was inferior as the head of a magical family. In essence, he resembled Shinji Matu, if Shinji had grown up, ironic since he is Shinji's father, but with a snide attitude rather than a haughty demeanor. He now indulged in the fine dining and drinking that come with living in the modern world. Being put in charge of the clan by an elderly vampire, whom he feared greatly, was something he was attempting to capitalize on. But he's still a worthless coward. His son was totally unsuited to be the heir to a family of magus because he was born without any magic circuits. Sakura Matu, formerly Sakura Tasaka, filled that need. Like her sister, she possessed enormous magical potential. For several reasons, her father, Tokiomi Tasaka, chose to give her to Zoken. First, since it was clear that both of his daughters would be engaged in combat during the Holy Grail War, he would arrange for them to engage in combat, with greater recognition and honors going to the victor. Additionally, Sakura's imaginary numbers were less significant than Rin's average 1 status, and he didn't need his daughters fighting needlessly because the competition for the right to be an heir to a magus family was so fierce. Naruto would have snorted and kicked Tokiomi in the stomach for being a fool if he had known this. He strongly disapproved of the idea of discarding your family for such vile reasons. Sakura Matu eventually made it to the Matu home, and then she was infested by those abhorrent crest worms, which mimicked a magical crest but had horrifying side effects. The worms would obliterate a male's body, as Naruto had said, but within the body of a woman. Really, it looked like something from a bad hentai, the kind that are obscene and repulsive. The worm pit will not be described by this author. Sakura received training in that manner, to learn the Matu style of magecraft. By immersing herself in a pit of these repulsive worms that were a part of her grandfather. She's only 5 years old, remember. At the tender age of 5, she had lost her innocence. How horrifying and depressing it must be to deflow a 5-year-old. It's depressing and melancholy. That new daughter didn't really matter to Byakuya. He was more worried that his uncle would attempt to place him in the worm pit. Kariya and Sakura were demonstrating that death by worm was undoubtedly not a pleasant way to pass away. No, it would be best to keep his head down and take any necessary action to protect his own reputation. Byakuya decided to take a stroll outside while intoxicated. Why? He was inebriated. In his inebriated days, he somehow came to the conclusion that going outside would be a fantastic idea. When he noticed something odd, he was in the main hall that led to the main door. A tapping sound was coming from the big double-doored wooden doorway. Wah! Wash thish! Str! Strangeth noiseth! He murmured. At this point, he was totally wasted. It couldn't have been intruders, surely. The majority of magi and all mundanes should have been kept out by the wards and barriers. To enter the Matu estate, you would essentially need to be able to break into a fortress. Nobody who lived here was capable of doing that, right? Byakuya failed to remember that the Holy Grail War was in progress. This implied that the Matu wards could be fully penetrated by at least 2 of the masters. Additionally, he was blind to the thunking sounds coming from the big mahogany door. A sign that someone had placed something on it. He did, however, hear someone cheerfully call out the phrase. Didn't you know? Art is an explosion, still inebriated, but quickly sobering up, the blue-haired wimp blinked blearily. Wah! Katsu. The door was blasted off its hinges and shattered into 4 pieces with a loud boom. Its durability was demonstrated by the fact that it largely survived such a powerful explosion. Like some kind of bizarre grenade, 2 of the pieces, 2 halves of one of the double doors, wedged themselves into walls and sprayed wooden shrapnel everywhere. There was a thunk sound as one of the pieces, which was roughly 7/8 of the other door, sailed across the hallway and grazed Byakuya's scalp before landing in the wall facing the former door. After trembling for a while, it eventually calmed down. But the last piece of the door landed in a far worse place. It was the sharpest piece, more like a big stake or splinter, actually. It was extremely pointy and sharp, and if someone were to poke themselves with it by accident, they would surely get painful splinters. It was moving too fast. Had raced to the crotch of the Matu. Let's start with the point. At extremely fast speeds. Furthermore, we're talking more about the waist than the high groin area. The danglies that hung beneath the aforementioned groin area are what we are referring to. Byakuya Matu had just suffered a massive splinter to the balls. To put it simply, it must have been unbearable. With his face pale and his eyes wide open in shock and horror, the blue-haired man opened his mouth as though to scream. He didn't scream, though. A strangled whimper was all that came out of his mouth before he collapsed to the ground, his mouth frothing. He discovered that the splinter was burning, which made things worse. Now his pants were burning, too. Byakuya let out another shrill whimper of pain and suffering. It truly wasn't his day. How could he have earned such bad luck? Luckily, a bucket of water that was poured on his pants put out the fire and prevented further damage to his nether regions. Before everything went dark, he looked up to see a blond man in a suit staring down at him sheepishly while carrying an empty pail. After dumping a large amount of water on the man's crotch, Naruto turned his head away from the twitching, foaming man. A little embarrassed by what had just happened, he scratched his head lightly and muttered, oops. Didn't expect that to happen. He certainly didn't anticipate that the explosion would actually cause harm to anyone. They would only have been harmed if they had attempted to go outside or something. In the middle of the night, though, what fool would do that? It was 12:30 a.m., literally midnight. There were no convenience stores or anything similar near the Matu Manor, so who would be foolish enough to venture outside at such an absurd hour? There was no reason to leave, not one. Naruto let out a sigh. What a moron. Alcohol undoubtedly did not help this man's judgment. On the contrary, it most likely made it worse. Amazingly so. The blue-haired man smelled strongly of alcohol. The blonde magus actually had to resist the urge to shove tissues in his nose because it was so physically overwhelming. Sealing the pail, he sighed. Although this could be considered collateral damage, Naruto didn't think so. An enemy magus owned the house. One who had done horrible things and was acting like a total jerk. Naruto was willing to completely destroy the city as long as fighting didn't spread to the civilian area. Saber gave her master a strange look. Naruto, why do you have a bucket sealed in that scroll? Why not? I had room. And you never know when you might need a bucket. With a sigh, the smaller blonde shrugged her shoulders while wearing black. She paused and said, fair enough, I suppose. And was it really necessary to say that phrase? In frustration, Naruto squeezed the bridge of his nose. Art is an explosion. No, it was a spur of the moment thing, sorry. Exasperated by her master's strange behavior, Saber palmed her face and sighed, please don't do that again, it was unusual. Sometimes he behaved like such a child. Naruto said, deadpan and utterly sarcastic, yes, mother. Don't give me that look, you would have kicked the door in if you had your way. After thinking about it for a moment, Saber sighed. Very well then. I shall defer to your judgment in this scenario. Let's begin then. The consequences of breaking into Zoken Matu's home were unique. As Naruto had foreseen, familiars from the different war masters followed him as soon as he left the 100-meter radius around his house. One Waver Velvet, for example, saw him right away but chose not to provoke the blonde. He would be crazy to fight that guy, after all. It would be best to keep his servant in the dark about the situation. Knowing him, he would most likely rush to the Matu mansion to participate. However, one Kenneth Archibald L. Meloy planned to destroy the biggest threat in the war in the tallest structure, the Hyatt Hotel in Fuyuki City. Lancer, you have your orders. Carry them out. Naturally, he would avoid any contact with that insane idiot. It was already clear to him that confronting him would be suicide. That was his excuse, anyway, for remaining in his hotel room. When he attempted to explain his reasoning, his fiancée scoffed, but Kenneth remained steadfast this time. After all, he actually enjoyed life quite a bit. Additionally, Kuritsugu Emiya was preparing to eliminate the top target on his list. He was still making backup plans and contingency plans while he tinkered with the large pistol in his right hand, just in case. The only sign of assassins' approach to the Matu mansion was a murmur of shadows. There was a target, and it needed to be taken out. Tokiomi Tasaka nervously paced the church floor where he was staying. The assassin would have to fulfill his duties. After the assassin completed his task, he would fire the last opponent standing in his way of realizing his goal of seeing the route. How was he going to fail? The news that Naruto and Saber had just blown in the doors of the Matu residence caused a blonde man wearing fancy clothes and ridiculously large golden earrings to pause, savor his wine, grin, and dematerialize in golden particles. The mongrel continues to interest me. I might as well see what he is up to then. If anything, it should be entertaining. Another figure in ill-fitting robes stopped chopping up a helpless child, then ran to a crystal ball and sobbed at the image it contained. She comes. The holy maiden, I must greet her. Uryu Ryunosuke shouted with joy, yes sir, Mr. Bluebeard, while twanging on different entrails in a grotesque imitation of a stringed instrument. The individual from whom the aforementioned entrails originated moaned feebly on the ground. Not you, Ryunosuke. You can stay here and create more beautiful art. I must greet my holy maiden in person. Okay, Mr. Bluebeard. Ryunosuke found this satisfactory. He was able to produce more amazing artwork because Mr. Bluebeard was excited, which in turn made him excited. When Mr. Bluebeard was feeling enthusiastic, he produced more artwork. How enjoyable. With a toothy smile, the red-haired man returned his attention to the whimpering lump of meat he was handling. Let's have fun now. Okay. And somewhere in the depths of Karia's hell, an elderly, stooped man leaned on his cane and grinned toothily, his wrinkles sinking and only serving to highlight how ugly he was. He's arrived then. Let's see what Zelretch's apprentice is made of. And an old monster laughed deep within the dark, gloomy mansion. Didn't his stupid nephew come through? The sound of the laughter echoed through the mansion's hallways, into the room where his familiars writhed and squirmed, and into a tiny bedroom where a little girl with purple hair shivered. She whispered, "Grandfather's happy." That was not encouraging. She had to go into the dark place because bad things always happened to her when grandfather was happy. She was reluctant to enter the shadowy area. As anticipated, one figure was now the center of attention. Naruto Uzumaki, the main subject of their attention, composed himself for the upcoming challenges. Here we go. Cry havoc and let loose the dogs of war, he grumbled. Katsu. Another wooden door was blasted off its hinges by an explosion that began with a cracking sound. Through the smoke, two blonde figures in suits moved placidly. Naruto looked around the deserted hallway before becoming a little more at ease. Clear, there's nothing here. Saber frowned. It seems as if the rat has holed himself up in his den of filth. Naruto gave a headshake. He paused and said, he's a tricky one, a real worm. Oh hell no. The two were in front of two passages. There are two doors that lead to two distinct places. One led to a basement, while the other went to the second floor. The blonde servant let out a sigh. There are two ways that we can proceed, or so he wants us to think. Don't you watch scary movies, Zoken? You never split up in the creepy mansion. Bad things happen, every single time. Naruto glanced toward the upstairs door. Let's go, Saber. Saber looked at her master and said, yes. Of course. By the way, what made you choose the upstairs route? Come. I felt like it. An anime-style bead of sweat formed on Saber's forehead. You felt like it. There was a long pause before Saber hung her head. With a sigh, the blonde servant put both of her hands to her face. Naruto, you act too carefree sometimes. Oi, that's mean. Saber hurried up the stairs, leaving her irate master behind, and said, let's go, Naruto. We have business to attend to. So cold. The other servants had reached the Matu mansion in the meantime. 3 variations of the servant of silent murder crept into the aforementioned mansion, and Assassin was the first to arrive. Kirei Kotomine, their master, sent 3 male variations, all donning the recognizable white mask. At the church, the executor was unwinding, or, more accurately, attempting to unwind. Naturally, to no avail. Lancer appeared 5 minutes later and walked boldly into the mansion. He would get rid of the man his lord feared for his newly proclaimed lord. After some time, a bloody knight with silver plating appeared with a white-haired woman. Irisfiel muttered, I can sense other servants here. Avenger let out a harump. It seems that we're not the only ones present at this debacle. HMPH. Well, it doesn't matter. The more enemies here, the more corpses at the end. Let us go then, Irisfiel. Gazing through the scope of his sniper rifle at the image of his wife and servant, Kuritsugu Emiya sighed up on a nearby hillock. The message from his companion, Maya Hasa, was announced by a burst of static on his radio. Avenger is being as loud as ever. That's certainly annoying. Kuritsugu. I'm in position. Roger that, Maya. Stay in position until further notice. Roger. With a slight grunt, the Magus killer looked through the rifle's scope again, searching the mansion and its surroundings for any indications of life. All of these masters and servants had come together with the intention of killing Naruto Uzumaki. The blonde had established himself as one of the war's most dangerous masters, if not the most so. It was serious business to go toe-to-toe with a servant. When it was a berserker, that is. In addition, he was keeping a servant, yet he was still able to fight like that, and he possessed unidentified but obviously effective weapons and techniques, such as a mystic code that could withstand blows from a noble phantasm. It certainly did not present a positive image. Everyone needed to defeat Naruto. That was beyond doubt. Kuritsugu was now aware that the true enemy to be concerned about was Naruto Uzumaki. Compared to Kirei, he was even more mysterious. He was more powerful than Kirei. In addition, his servant was more powerful than Kirei's. In short, he had very little chance of realizing his dream if he didn't destroy Naruto Uzumaki right away. That's why he was looking through a sniper rifle scope while sitting atop a hill. In actuality, the strategy was fairly straightforward. Naruto and his servant, Saber, would be flushed out of the mansion by Avenger and Irisfiel. It was just a matter of getting a good shot off from there. Kuritsugu's new issue would most likely be killed by a bullet to the head, if not. Kuritsugu glanced at a large pistol for a moment, the Thompson Contender, his mysterious code. There were, after all, backup plans. All you had to do was get close enough to use them. One Sakura Matu heard odd sounds coming from her bedroom. These are the sounds of destruction. Exploded? Then came the voice of an unfamiliar person, a woman, and another voice. It was peculiar, for sure. Was her grandfather or uncle hosting visitors, or something? The voices grew louder, as though they were traveling to a place right outside her room. Naruto, you cannot simply destroy every door with explosive tags. Were you not complaining about how difficult it was to make them in the first place? But Saber. No buts. Using that many explosive tags was completely unnecessary. Besides, I believe that this is the right room anyway. Blowing up more doors would be counterproductive. A long, deep sigh. Fine, you're no fun. Sakura heard a knock on her bedroom door. The lock made a few clicking sounds before the unidentified man became impatient and kicked the door in. Naruto. You said no explosive tags, and I suck at picking locks. Sakura gazed incredulously at the blue-eyed, blonde-haired man who had kicked in the door and then at his green-eyed, blonde female companion. They both exuded professionalism and were dressed in black suits. How was she meant to feel? Was she meant to be afraid or something? Her training had lasted 3 days before she lost the ability to scream. Sakura Matu? The man softly inquired. Sakura gave a nod. All right. My name's Naruto Uzumaki. How do you do? The little girl with purple hair was even more perplexed. Why was this man concerned? When Naruto saw that Sakura was not answering at all, but rather had a blank expression on her face and in her eyes, he let out a sigh. That was the expression of someone who had given up on hope and would never be able to hope again. Those eyes belonged to people who had experienced severe trauma or terror, and a child shouldn't have had those eyes. The blonde master was reminded of his own childhood eyes by those eyes. His fists clenched, and he vowed to hold that vile worm accountable for destroying a child's innocence. He also vowed to keep that young girl safe and away from this eerie mansion. Karya Matu sent me to get you out of here. Uncle Karya? He sent you? Yeah. Are you coming with us? Sakura hesitated. How'd I know that I can trust you? The blonde scowled. You really don't, but your uncle sent me to get you out of this hell hole. I can't promise that I'm telling the truth, but... Silently, Sakura said, okay, I'll go, but grandfather won't let me go. Don't you know? You can't oppose grandfather. Naruto knelt down and touched Sakura's head. Don't worry about that old worm. We'll get you out of here, and you'll be back with your uncle soon. Promise? Yeah, I promise. The little girl rose from her bed as Sakura nodded. It couldn't get any worse for her, could it? Besides, what did she have to lose? No, she'd go with this man, because he said he was sent by Uncle Karya, and Uncle Karya was a good man. Saber spun around, and donned her dress and armor. Naruto. I know. We have company. Well then, we're leaving. The first enemies that the group encountered were assassins. Servant assassin. A blade embedded itself in the wall as Naruto dodged a lunge by a black-clad figure. Naruto. Sabers cried out. The blonde dodged another lunge, before speeding forward and hitting the figure in the chest with the palm of his hand. A wheezing gurgle emitted from the assassin, before it toppled to the ground, dead. It dissolved into tiny particles shortly afterwards, leaving behind a small, short tri-pronged knife. Something's off. That was assassin, but assassin was supposedly killed on the first night. Clearly, something's off about that, So then, that means, the church isn't a safe place. Assassin was the servant of Kirei Kotomine, and Kirei has sought sanctuary in the church. So, he faked Assassin's death as to draw away suspicion. While I would say that is ingenious, he has given the game away. But why? Why would he reveal that Assassin is still in the realm of the living? Naruto froze. Unless he was sure that there would be no one left alive to know that Assassin was still alive. And seeing as Assassin is clearly not dead, and this one looks different. Assassin has the ability to make copies of himself. Saber concluded, similar to how you can make clones of yourself then. With a sigh, the blonde picked up the kunai and put it back in his sleeve. Keep your guard up then. Kirei Kotomine, from all reports, is not a stupid man. He wouldn't have sent in just one version of his servant to deal with us, especially after the previous night. The brunette continued to smile. Hey. This is a good thing though, it means that my plan is working. Regardless, our first priority is to get Sakura Matu away from this place. Like a real pro, Kuritsugu Emiya looked through the scope of his rifle again, examining every potential escape route. He was a professional, though. He muttered under his breath, still no sign. It's been 30 minutes since Irisfiel and Avenger entered the mansion. What's taking so long? For his part, Kuritsugu wanted to know why Naruto Uzumaki was at the Matu mansion at all. There was no obvious reason for him to visit the location. There was nothing significant, and Naruto had no justification for putting his life in danger in that way. Even though the Magus killer didn't think it mattered, it was still something to consider. Why had Naruto Uzumaki come here in the first place? A new figure emerged in a glow of golden light, startling him out of his reverie. Archer. Gilgamesh, the king of heroes, wearing luxurious-looking contemporary apparel, dazzling golden jewelry, and a smug, haughty grin. As Kuritsugu put it, shit. Maya. I see him. Kuritsugu. What do we do? The Magus killer swore in his head. He anticipated the arrival of other masters and servants, but Archer? Even though it was anticipated, it was still undesirable. When the golden servant glanced in Kuritsugu's direction and grinned arrogantly, his nervousness was only heightened. Shish. T. That guy is aware of my presence, and he is aware that I am aware of his presence. What should I do? The servant looked away, obviously bored by his presence now, and the Magus killer sighed with relief. What the hell is that guy doing here? When Kuritsugu looked at the master, he suddenly became anxious, which greatly amused Gilgamesh. He found it amusing when he scared the living daylights out of the Magus killer, but his presence was annoying. Indeed, the King of Heroes was greatly amused by the Magus killer's response. Enough to put up with his irritation, for the time being. He is indeed a troll. With a golden cup of wine in his right hand, the servant took a golden chair from his gate of Babylon and took a seat. In essence, he pretended to be the uninterested monarch while he awaited the revelation of his interest. Are you going to entertain me again, mongrel? Regardless, this should prove to be quite interesting. Show me. Show me the power that has drawn my attention. Fuck. Naruto swore as he sidestepped another blow to the stomach. Then, he delivered a vicious uppercut in return, striking the would-be killer in the jaw and sending him reeling. Soon after, he was killed by a quick knife to the heart. Since he had gone inside the mansion, there had been 2 attempts on his life. Naruto scowled inwardly at the efforts. They appeared to. Saber. Don't you feel as if something is off? Naruto. Assassin is the master of the silent kill. The knives that guy used were meant for mid to long range combat. Same with the weapons of the one before him. Don't you think it's odd that he would engage in close combat like that, when he's clearly unsuited for it? Now that you mention it, do you think that assassin's master is gathering information? Sakura had been wandering around behind the two, but Naruto picked her up and said, yeah, that's probably it. He's testing us. Testing the waters, so to speak. To see how we would react to these unexpected attacks. The 3rd time will be the determining attack. That's when he'll fight seriously. We had better leave before that happens. Alright then, up you go. We're getting out of here, now. Now that Assassin's presence had been detected, the 3 of them continued to trudge through the eerie mansion, their senses alert for any further confrontations. The level of tension was at an all-time high. The kind of things that could lurk in the shadows were something Naruto was more aware of than the others. After all, he had been trained as a shinobi and had previously worked as an assassin. He was aware that a lot of unpleasant things could be concealed by the shadows. The group eventually arrived at the main entrance's burned-out remains. Sakura observed the devastation caused by an explosion. Broken wood, shattered glass, doors wedged into the walls, and... Inquiringly, is that Uncle Byakuya? What happened to him? The blue-haired man was, in fact, still curled up in the fetal position on the ground. He was frothing a little at the mouth and had a blue face. His immediate discomfort was likely caused by a huge wood splinter that lodged in his crotch. In reality, it was more like a fucking steak. He wasn't feeling well. That guy? He was in the wrong place, at the wrong time. And I may have overdid it with the explosions. Sakura wrinkled her nose a little and said, oh, one can imagine what it would smell like to a girl who has spent time in a worm pit when she says, he smells bad, really bad. Naruto hesitated. He must have crapped himself after getting shot in the balls. That and he's drunk as sin. Saber let out a sigh. We might as well leave him here. He seems to be healthy at the very least. The ruined doorway was only a few more steps away. After a few more steps, Sakura and her rescuers would be able to bid the twisted, cursed mansion farewell. Unfortunately, our protagonists were given the finger by fate. Armored boots slammed against the stone floor as metal sounded. I didn't think that I'd see you this soon, father. What a pleasant surprise. Naruto suppressed a curse. This was the one opponent he would really prefer to avoid and the one who might throw his plan off course. Saber said coolly, Avenger. I should have known. Enough talk, Arthur. Let us settle our differences, once and for all. With a frown, Saber aimed the tip of her invisible blade at her misbehaving son. I do not wish to fight you, Mordred. My priority right now is making sure that girl is rescued. Step aside, before I force you to step aside. We both know what my answer is going to be. Saber let out a sigh. Very well then, Naruto. On it, Saber. You can handle Avenger, can't you? Of course. He turned to go, holding the young girl with the purple hair in his arms, but he stopped a few feet from the doorway and said, then I'll leave you to it then. Saber, win. Of course, Naruto. The blonde nodded slightly to his servant before disappearing into the night. With a sigh, Saber faced her opponent once more. You're not going after him? Mordred gave a snort. No, of course not. My quarrel is with you, Arthur. I care not for a mere human. Now, let us fight. Let our swords speak rather than our tongues. So mote it be. As he emerged from the blasted out remains of the Matu Mansion's main entrance, Naruto inhaled deeply. Sakura found it hard to believe. This is the outside? Does that mean that? Quietly, the blonde said, "You're free. I told you, didn't I? You'll be with your uncle soon." "But what about your grandfather?" Naruto grinned sarcastically at this. "That should be taken care of, shortly." Break-in-line Zoken Matu realized something serious was happening when he felt the wards on his mansion go down. Even more so after witnessing that odd new upstart master destroy his front door. The truth is that he saw the blonde master as both a chance and a minor irritation. The idiot had struck a bargain with his foolish nephew, based on what he could learn from his worms. How stupid. His granddaughter, Sakura's rescue was apparently his goal. This made the old worm, Zoken, laugh. This Naruto Uzumaki was apparently one of those goody. Shrewd, noble, well. Meaning chumps. This implied that he would be simple to control. He only needed to do this. "You know, you disgusted me the first time we met. Did you know that, Zoken? Bastard?" "What?" The worm. Loving man turned around and saw Naruto Uzumaki, the target of his scheme, directly. The blonde man made a V with his right index and middle fingers while grinning cheesily. "Yo." In a fit of rage, Zoken exclaimed, "How the foo? How did you get in here? You left. I sensed you leaving," with obvious shock at this sudden development. It was really unsettling that he was unable to detect the blonde's presence at all. Or was it some twisted version of presence concealment? At any rate, he was more surprised than anything else to find a possible enemy inside his inner sanctum. "Ah, you don't need to know that. Dead men don't need to know just what I'm capable of." Zoken gave a sneer. Regaining some of his former confidence, he blustered, "Do you honestly think that you can kill me? You're welcome to try." Was he not essentially unbreakable? Yes, he was practically impossible to kill using conventional methods as long as his soul was bound to his familiars. Naruto sighed, clearly irritated. "The problem I have is that you actually did horrible things to your family. That's unacceptable. Zoken Matu, for the crime of using your kin to advance your own selfish goals, I pass judgment on you. The punishment is death." The blonde went on to look absolutely evil, and Zoken was forced to back off due to his overwhelming presence. It was as terrifying as a great predator cornering a shivering rat. The predator in question was aiming for the kill. It was more like a certainty that he would die than an intent to kill. Zoken sputtered, You can't kill me." In the presence of such a demonic creature, all of his confidence was gone. To put it plainly, Naruto was neither a nice man nor the laid back individual Zoken had believed him to be. At that moment, Naruto was fucking evil. Naruto calmly retorted, "You know, it's idiots like you that annoy me to no end. Oh, why am I even speaking to you? Just die." He produced a piece of paper that appeared innocent if it weren't for the elaborate seals on it. "Oh, I know about how you've tied your essence to those familiars." Zoken looked up. "Didn't you know though? If all of your familiars die, then you die. And I know for a fact that you haven't transplanted the greater portion of your soul into Sakura or Karia. Yet, I couldn't feel your disgusting essence in either of them. Meaning that you're stuck here. So, all I have to do is kill all of the worms that are inside the mansion." You can't do that, it's impossible, you're bluffing." Naruto put the seal on the floor and channeled a very small amount of OD into it, saying, "The word, impossible, isn't in my dictionary. Sorry about that." The small sheet of paper fizzled a little. What did that? After that, it burst into black flame. Extremely hot to the touch, a pitch black flame with a demonic appearance. The black hellfire ate everything it came into contact with, including walls and floorboards. Even Zuken's own deteriorating body. The elderly Matu family ancestor continued to scream in pain as he felt his familiars continue to burn. He was horrified to discover that his body was not regenerating from the flames. Instead, the unbelievably black flame was merely consuming everything it came into contact with. Some trivia for how you're going to die. That's Amaterasu, the black flames from hell said to be as hot as the sun. It's unquenchable, and it burns for 7 days and 7 nights, until whatever it touches has been completely burned to ashes. Complete destruction. Additional thumps suggested that more of these seals had been detonated at different locations throughout the mansion, including the worm pit. Zoken kept screaming in pain as he felt his familiar faces continue to perish, be reduced to ashes by this fire of damnation, and then become nothing more than molecules in the wind. You would not believe how difficult it was to get these flames. It was hard, dangerous, and I nearly died fighting the guy that could cast them. Not to mention it was a pain in the ass devising a sealing method that could actually release the flames while containing them safely, and then I couldn't even control them, only contain them. My teacher's seals could only contain Amaterasu, not release it, so I had to figure that out from scratch. It was annoying as all hell, but for mass demolition, these tags are ideal. I'm going to have to seal them later. Man, that's going to be a pain. Naruto got up. Nice meeting you. Sayonara, bastard. You. The shadow clone disappeared with a puff of smoke, leaving the run-down old man to perish in the flames. Oh, don't worry. The seals that the flames are contained in have automated containment seals. The fire's going to burn in a set area only, before it stops. That set area just happens to be your mansion. Have fun. Zoken screamed as the fire raged on. He could still sense the burning of his familiars and the gradual disintegration of his physical body. To his increasing horror, he came to the realization that he was truly going to die. No, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. No. The mansion would be reduced to cinders and ashes in 7 days. One Zoken Matu would be nothing more than dust in the wind by the end of the week. All of his aspirations, his schemes for immortality, nothing more than a vengeful ghost of his past. An appropriate conclusion for someone who enjoyed playing with other people's lives and enjoying his own family's misery. For the first 3 days, Zoken screamed. On the 4th day, he ceased to scream and instead whimpered. He was unable to talk, scream, or even speak by the 5th day. He couldn't pass away until the 7th day. He was ultimately given the absolution of death on the 7th day. As he was given the memories of his shadow clone, Naruto let out a sigh. Yeah, we're going to have to collect those seals. What a pain. Sakura, who was walking next to the taller man, gave him a curious look. The blonde dismissed the inquiring glance with a wave. It's nothing. Just some scum that was just dealt with. Oh. Okay. The magus with the golden hair ran a hand through his hair and calculated how much time had gone by in his mind. We should be leaving now. While I am certain that Saber can buy us enough time to get to safety, it would be prudent to get going now. How do you know that Saber is going to be safe? Because, she's Saber. That's really it. I have faith in her skills. She won't lose. Oh. Okay. Sakura's blank responses made Naruto snarl in his head. It was heartbreaking to see how traumatized this little girl was by her encounter with Zoken. She was so emotionless and empty. He was relieved because he was certain that Zoken would be in excruciating pain for the approaching week. It ought to have ended by now, really. There ought to have been no more disputes. He wasn't inside the house. He was on his way home after saving Sakura Matu. Saber would be on her way soon. Then he noticed Lancer, the attractive man with spears in hand who was about 10 meters away. Naruto grinned. Part 2 of his plan appeared to be going forward after all. Part 1. Use a smash dot and grab style entry to kill Zoken Matu and save Sakura Matu. As fast as you can, in and out. Section 2. Other masters would surely take advantage of this chance to eliminate a significant threat. Thus, while Sakura is being rescued, Naruto reached into his pockets and removed his hands. The second step is. The blonde was aware that other people would seize the opportunity to get rid of him. After all, that's what he would have done himself. Lancer apologized and said, I'm sorry about this, but my lord has ordered me to eliminate you. Naruto held up his hand. Don't apologize. Just fight me. Now is not the time of words. Are you going to fight me or not? The servant with the spear braced himself. Very well then. I, Dirmud Uedwivna, challenge you, Naruto Uzumaki, to an honorable duel. Do you accept? The blonde looked at his smaller friend. Sakura, why don't you go wait over there? I'll be done shortly. Sakura sat on a nearby boulder and nodded, stepping back from the scene of the upcoming altercation. Naruto muttered, then grinned. Well then, it seems that I have to stomp some ass today. How exciting. Lancer gave a small shake of his head. If you had trouble fighting Berserker, then I doubt that you would last very long against me were I to go all out. Are you still certain that you wish to fight me? Naruto grimaced. Oi, are you looking down on me? From what I have seen, your speed and strength, while certainly above that of a normal magus and human, is more akin to a lower-classed servant's speed and strength. Certainly not anything that could match mine. It is not honorable to face such an outclassed opponent. The Lance's servant was bewildered by the blonde's continued smile. What is this? Why are you smiling? Ah, so you underestimate me. Good. Glad to see that's working. Sorry about this, but your misconceptions about my strength. I'll simply have to break your rigidness. Two things, Lancer. First of all, I had underestimated Berserker. I misjudged his strength, and I paid dearly for it. The second, did you honestly think that I was going all out on the first night? Two clones gathered in the world's natural energy while meditating in a far-off clearing, far from Zukin's mansion. One clone disappeared with a puff of smoke. To Lancer's dismay, the blonde magus leapt forward, appearing right in front of him and assuming a combat stance. Quick, he moves quickly. What the devil? He had never been this fast before. Was he? The man was knocked back with a punch to the stomach, rolling and tumbling for 10 meters before he straightened out. What is this? That is truly monstrous. Get up, Lancer. You wanted a duel, didn't you? I'm not going to hold back on you. This is how Naruto's 2-part plan went. Part 1. Kill the old bastard and save Sakura. Section 2. Get rid of the other servants who have seriously underestimated my abilities in trying to save Sakura. He had two goals in mind. The removal of possible adversaries and the saving of a defenseless girl. He was currently acting out Part 2 after finishing Part 1. Lancer coughed briefly and got to his feet unsteadily. His body had been seriously damaged by that one punch. It was not comparable to Naruto's earlier prowess. Naruto's current punches were fully capable of crushing the cinder blocks back to their basic components, if his previous punches were able to shatter them. Even if you were a hero, punches like that hurt. Lancer wasn't wearing armor either. As a result, there was nothing at all that could have been hit hard. It was totally unexpected how strong and quick they were. The servant with the spear tsked a little, well aware that he had miscalculated his opponent and had paid a heavy price for it. It seems that this battle will not be as simple as I had originally thought. That night, two figures looked down at each other. Unnatural black flames illuminated the confrontation, which was silhouetted against the backdrop of a burning mansion. The bricks, mortar, and supports were gradually being eaten away by these flames, turning everything they came into contact with into dust and ashes in the wind. Two figures, looking warily at each other. A man with tight, fitting clothes on one side brandished two finely crafted spears, one golden, yellow and one crimson-red, both encased in cloth that negated their powers. Both the yellow rose of mortality and the crimson rose of exorcism were ready to strike. The other was a tall, golden-haired man in a fine, long, lasting suit, his eyes tinted with orange pigmentation. His hands were in his pockets, and he appeared to be completely carefree. However, a close examination revealed that this figure was tense, ready to both deliver and receive a blow. Because his laziness was really a front, a kind of deception. These two men kept looking at each other in the same way that two alpha males or predators would look at each other. Waiting for the attack, waiting for one to move. Fists would be thrown and spears would swing into action at any moment. The man with the spear eased up a little and adjusted his hold. Naruto struck at that precise moment, moving forward at speeds that could only be characterized as superhuman. He moved so quickly that many creatures were unable to keep up with him. Lancer was not one of those creatures. He swore as he was sent skidding back several feet, creating a small trench in the field's dirt, after deflecting a blow with the shaft of his red spear. This strength is completely out of control. From where is he getting this? He had never before displayed such physical strength, was he truly? He muttered, obviously upset by this development. Damn, you really were holding back then. Naruto grinned. He sighed, isn't it obvious? Man, this is a pain though. Still, even if you have activated some kind of super mode, such a thing is going to have very adverse effects on your body. After all, you are still immortal. With a small tisk, Naruto kicked Lancer in the undefended kneecap, causing the servant to jump back a little to avoid the blow. Really, that depends on your definition of mortal. I don't consider myself a human anymore. No, I'm a demon. And it was your bad luck to fight me. So tell me, dear mood of the love spot. Can you kill a demon? Huh? Naruto then launched his attack once more. He really rushed Lancer, charging directly at him. Lancer was ready this time. It was an exhibition of the fighter's skills and abilities and a testament to their respective martial prowess. Lancer barraged the blonde suit with blow after blow, spears slicing and stabbing at lightning speed. A lesser man would be under pressure from such an attack if he weren't first sliced to pieces. But, in an amazing display of agility and dexterity, Naruto avoided every single strike, sometimes by a hair's breadth, much to Lancer's surprise. What's this? It's simply too quick. How could he have gotten this quick? He's nearly as quick as me. Lancer's greater reach was his primary advantage. The blonde magus had to get closer to his target before he could start striking, but his spears could strike him from a distance. Furthermore, Naruto had just eliminated the reach advantage that Lancer's spears had given him. Lancer's stomach was struck by a fist, and the servant flinched in agony as he was flung back a few meters before he caught himself. Even though Naruto was slower and had a shorter attacking range, he possessed one thing that was crucial in this battle. Power. The super mode that Naruto had activated had increased his strength to unbelievable proportions. He was so much more powerful than Lancer that the servant with the spear was unable to be struck again. Punches and kicks like that would make him fold like a poorly built house of cards in a strong wind, even if he was a servant. Internal organs were ruptured, bones were broken, muscles were bruised, and tendons were snapped in those punches. Even though the servant had attempted to reduce the damage by avoiding the approaching force and aiming for a glancing hit rather than a direct one, moderate damage had still been done. Naruto was much closer to winning this duel if he could hit Lancer with 2 or 3 well-placed blows. With a wince, Lancer wiped away a trail of blood that was dripping from his mouth's corner. "It seems that I'll have to go all out again. How fortunate. You truly are a worthy foe, Master of Saber." Naruto hummed in agreement. The blonde gingerly rubbed his forearm and said, "You're not bad yourself. I underestimated you. I thought that you'd go down after the first blow. Impressive damage control." And a spearhead had sliced through his suit sleeve and scraped its way across Naruto's arm, revealing a lengthy gash. In actuality, it wasn't a serious injury. However, the fact still stands. Naruto had been hit by Lancer. With a vicious smile spreading across his face, Naruto muttered, "Hee, how exciting." Lancer grinned, too. "Very well then. Let's commence round 2. Following the last battle, both fighters had established some distance between themselves and their opponents. Like the beginning of the fight, they looked at one another suspiciously, waiting for the slightest gap. There was a rustle of clothing as Naruto pulled out his sealing scroll, and 2 strips of cloth fell to the ground as Lancer released the power of his spears. Then, as both fighters charged at one another with their weapons in hand, the battle was joined again. The Matu family's former mansion was burning steadily. Instead of moving quickly, it was more leisurely. Since that area of the mansion wasn't yet on fire and wouldn't be for a while, the 2 servants fighting in the main hall were not in any real danger. It was a sword fight, with stray blows scraping off armor and blades fighting blades. A blue knight and a red knight in gleaming armor. The fight resembled something from a fantasy. GGH, it wasn't the blood that spilled. Avenger swore bitterly as she felt Saber's sword's blade pierce her leg at the unarmored joint, leaving a shallow gash that oozed blood every time she moved. The wound was bothersome even though the servant of the sword had fortunately avoided cutting any significant veins or arteries, and it was quite painful.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.